Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting for October 2nd, 2019. We'll call the meeting to order at this time. We do have a quorum present tonight. And before we move into our business, Mr. Ives, you had an introduction for us, I believe.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Yes, I would like to introduce to the Planning Commission our new attorney, Roman Hankin. Roman has 10 years experience, and a portion of that being an assistant city attorney with our neighbor to the north, Clarksville. And he has experience in land use and various related matters. I expect him to be giving me a hand with some things, and I think you'll be seeing him at least some of our meetings. We're glad to have him aboard. So, Roman, welcome to Murfreesboro.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. Welcome.
And Roman, we'll do all we can to get that tie converted over to blue and white.
All right. Our next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the September 4th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Did we have any additions or corrections to those minutes?
If there are none, I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We have some old business tonight. The first item is a zoning application for approximately 8.14 acres located along Shores Road to amend the West Lawn PUD to modify the buffering and screening plan along Shores Road. D.R. Horton is the applicant. Ms. Rush. Where's Ms. Rush? There she is.
I move seats on, y'all. Good evening, Commission. Yes, the applicant's requesting to amend the West Lawn Planned Unit Development Pattern Book to redesign the berm width and plantings for the portion that has not been planted yet, or I'm sorry, for the portion that's been planted. So the adjustment would be to reflect what's actually out in the field and in the existing conditions. The pattern book, it was not planted to that pattern because of the drainage ditch that was there, and they were not able to fit the berm with the drainage requirements for this particular area. So again, the request is just to modify the book to match the existing conditions. This did come before the Planning Commission last month on September 4th. At that time, a public hearing was conducted, so there's no need for a public hearing this evening. It was deferred to October 2nd to today as a date certain in order for the applicant to have time to meet with the residents out there. So they did hold a neighborhood meeting. They had residents that came from the West Lawn subdivision, as well as the neighborhood to the south. And once the neighbors found out what the project was text change, they were very much supportive. They were very glad that the landscaping was not going to be changed. The applicant is here tonight. If you have any questions, he'll be able to answer that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Rush or for the applicant?
If they had a very positive neighborhood meeting and nature has taken care of something that doesn't need to be done as far as development side, I think that's a good thing, and I would move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next, new business, because we are, item B in the old business has been withdrawn. So we're going to move next into our new business, and we do have 5 public hearings tonight. The first item under new business is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 44.75 acres located along South Rutherford Boulevard. Mary K. Murphy Family Partnership is the applicant. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chair Jones and members of the Planning Commission. This annexation request consists of a portion of a single parcel and is located on the north side of South Rutherford Boulevard and east of South Church Street and west of Southeast Broad Street. It is bordered on its west property line with CSX Railroad. The portion of the parcel which is requested for annexation is 44.75 acres and is undeveloped land. The western portion of the parcel was annexed into the city in 2012. The study area is located within the city's urban growth boundary and is contiguous with existing city limits on its north, south, and west boundaries. A plan of services has been conducted for this annexation and is included in your agenda package. Has been indicated that the city will be able to provide services to the subject property upon annexation. And Murfreesboro Electric Department will need to evaluate the demand for electric service upon the submittal of a proposed development to evaluate the demands of the electrical services needed to provide services to that development. Also, the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Resources Department is requiring that the development of the study area comply with the proposed sewer allocation ordinance, and all water and sewer mainline extensions necessary to serve future development of the study area will be the financial responsibility of the developer. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss the annexation petition and plan of services, and then formulate a recommendation for City Council. The next item on the agenda is for a rezoning request along with this property for a GI zoning, and that will be next on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Kerr before we open the public hearing? Okay. Just a few notes about our public hearings. Many of you have been here before, so you know a lot of these little rules that we have, but basically, if you would like to speak on any of these items tonight, you will come forward to the podium, just state your name and your address, and then any comments that you have, we would like you to make those to the Planning Commission, not to any of the developers or other people in the audience. We don't want clapping, cheering, hurraying, any added extras from the rest of the audience while people are at the podium speaking, please. And we do allow you to come up one time in each public hearing. So if you have things to say about the annexation petition, for example, in this, and then something else to say about the zoning, you can come up for each of those public hearings, but only once for each public hearing. You will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. I went out and bought a little timer because I'm not very good at keeping the 3 minutes, and it gets out of hand, and I apologize. So you will come up, again, state your name and address, and give us your comments, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for being here tonight. So we will open this first public hearing. Please ask anyone to come forward that would like to speak.
Can you hear me?
No,
Pull the microphone towards you a little bit. There you go.
Mary Ellen Sloan, 1545 Nathan Court. Can you show that map again, please? Thank
there
you.
we go.
Yeah, I live on the middle street there. You see the sign, where it says Forest. And you count the middle one, that's Nathan Court. And we've discussed with the city and the county quite a bit the fact that there's flooding coming from Lytle Creek that's significant, that even comes onto our property. And we haven't been able to get the city or the county, of course, not the city has said it's county property, which you're talking about annexation today, obviously. And the county has said that that's, Lytle Creek at that point is owned by that property owner. But we even talked to the USDA, who came out and assessed the situation and said that, they could remediate it, but there would be a cost. And I understand the property owner did give them permission to, remediate it, but wasn't willing to cover the cost. I'm not sure if any of this is familiar to any of you at all. Maybe the planning area. Yeah, he's nodding. Mm-hmm. So I would ask that, given the request for rezoning or annexation and rezoning, that remediating the current flooding issue and committing to continued management of the flow of Lytle Creek through that area would be required.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And I didn't mention any of your questions that you have as you make your comments. We're making notes of those, and then we'll try to address all the questions at the end of the public hearing. So thank you. Who's next? Nobody else? On the annexation, just on this one? Uh-huh. Okay, so we'll close that public hearing. And so we just have one concern there regarding the remediation of the flooding and drainage issues, and
Ms. Jones, I
you
would ask if
wanna take-
Mr. Sam Huddleston, our city's floodplain administrator, might have some thoughts on those concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Huddleston, good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Jones, members of the Planning Commission, Sam Huddleston, Development Services. We've tracked probably over the last decade or so complaints about beaver activity there, and I think that's what this is in reference to. So it's a wildlife management issue. Since it is private property, the city doesn't have the authority to just go in there and act. We have to have the landowner's permission to do that. And as the speaker stated, this is currently outside the jurisdiction of the city of Murfreesboro. We would certainly be in a better position to monitor that and work with the property owner if it is within our jurisdictional boundaries to take a look at it. While the risk of flooding from the Beaver Dam is very minor, they do have an impact on the stream and all of that, and so we have worked with property owners to and the TWRA and other wildlife services to work with that situation and relocate the beaver. Be glad to answer any other questions on that.
Any questions from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Huddleston, is there any, obviously Lytle Creek runs through there, so there's a floodplain that runs through there regardless. It's natural with the lay of the land. Any precedent at all about bringing properties annexing into the city, and to the point of the lady's question, trying to remediate any of that as it comes in? Any precedent we have for any of that?
As far as taking immediate action, when it comes in,
As a requirement.
dealing with a flooding or drainage issue. And so the quick analysis that I would, or quick thing I would share with you is that the situation we see out there is not posing a risk to improved properties or public infrastructure. It is disrupting the flow of the stream, but only to the extent that the Beaver Dam is 2 to 3 feet, 4 in some cases high. As rains and flows pick up in the fall and winter, those tend to correct themselves. Of course, they're busy as beaver, so they quickly reestablish. But it's a problem. I say it's a problem. It's a situation that we monitor on several streams: Sinking Creek, the West Fork of the Stones River during very, very dry times. They can establish there, Murphy Springs. And so we have to evaluate the potential risk and then the cost of action, and then our ability to act if it's private property or if we don't have the authority to be in there.
Thanks, sir.
It's always interesting to discuss flooding when we just come off the driest month in history. But is it a good idea to annex property that is floodplain, or especially for floodway, into the city? I mean, you would almost question whether or not that's a good idea. I mean,
Well, as the floodplain administrator, I prefer to have control of it,
Okay.
so we can regulate it to the city regulations.
right.
And observe it, and then make the property subject to our regulations. You might counter back and say, well, the county has a comparable. They do. We all have a model ordinance that we follow. I do know that we have an effective program for monitoring our streams and drainage networks. I'm not saying the county doesn't, but I know, I trust our staff and the efforts we take. And so as a floodplain administrator, I would be in favor of annexing the floodplain along with the bulk of the property.
And I would mention on page 13 of the Plan of Services, there's the map of the floodplain, and a significant portion of this property is located outside of the boundaries of the of the 100-year floodplain.
And that, Mr. Smotherman, to continue on that, we're also held accountable for the quality of Lytle Creek, and even though it weaves in and out of our jurisdiction along its length, I think it's beneficial for us to be able to also monitor and control the water quality, because we will be judged for the effectiveness of our program based on the in-stream quality observations made by TDEC.
And to carry it one step further, I guess it's important, I mean, with our fire and rescue department, to be able to get in there quicker than probably anybody else would in an emergency situation. So, yeah, it makes sense.
And actually, most of this northern piece, a large percentage of that property is in the floodway. So there's
Yes.
not much you can do there anyway.
Right, it's right. It doesn't have much development potential, with the exception of buffering and landscaping. Those are pretty commonly prescribed to floodplain, floodway areas. It also gives us that natural separation from the adjacent properties, as we've talked about before, for separation and buffering.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. We have further comments or questions?
If there is none, I'll make a motion that we approve the annexation and plan of services as outlined in this application.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Our next item would be the companion zoning application for approximately 44.75 acres located along South Rutherford Boulevard to be zoned GI simultaneous with annexation. Mary K. Murphy Family Partnership is the applicant. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you. This item is for the rezoning of the previous item that was on the agenda for the annexation and plan of services for this property located along the north side of South Rutherford Boulevard and east of South Church Street and west of Southeast Broad Street. It is a 44.75 acre property and is a larger portion of a parcel that is undeveloped land. The western half of the property is already located within the city limits and is zoned heavy industrial. The zoning classification requested for this property is General Industrial District. This property is currently zoned residential medium density in the unincorporated county. The properties to the west of the subject properties across railroad tracks are within the city and are zoned light industrial district. Adjacent property to the east is vacant land and is zoned RM in the county. The area to the north lies within the city and is zoned multifamily residential 16 and is vacant land owned by the Saratoga Park Homeowners Association. Properties located across South Rutherford Boulevard to the south are zoned heavy industrial and are developed with the West Rock and Husky Trust Company industrial facilities. The Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan recommends light industrial is the most appropriate land use character for the subject property, as shown in the future land use map in your agenda package. The characteristic of light industrial developments include large parking lots and storage yards and minimum green space and development uses such as light manufacturing and assembly, distribution, and warehousing. The LI zone is identified as an existing city zoning district that is most compatible with this land use character. The GI zone was not in existence at the time of the adoption of the comprehensive plan. The proposed rezoning to GI is consistent with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan, that it allows the types of light industrial uses associated with the light industrial land use character. However, it also allows some additional industrial uses that with a little bit greater intensity, which may seem as little inconsistent with the light industrial land use character. Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing and discuss the zoning request and formulate a recommendation for City Council.
Okay. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, we will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item regarding this zoning application. Yes, you can.
So
And you just go ahead and state your name and address
Yeah.
again. Thank you.
Thanks. Mary Ellen Sloan and 1545 Nathan Court.
Okay.
And so my understanding is that this is for the steel building company, right?
Don't,
What?
no, we don't have any, we are just, have an application for zoning.
Just zoning, okay, okay. So I wasn't clear from what the other speaker said, was the city committing to, if it's annexed and rezoned, maintaining the flow of water on Lytle Creek?
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, that's my question for you.
Committing, I'm going to get it down, committing to,
Committing to maintaining the flow of
Maintaining
water on Lytle
flow.
Creek. And it is impacting homes, it is impacting property.
Mhm.
It's going all the way across the Saratoga property.
I'm
Yeah,
going to
'cause
let
they-
Mr. Huddleston speak to that, if that's all you, if that's your only question. Committing to maintaining, I believe he spoke to that. You know, it's not in our jurisdiction, so we can't do anything, and there's only certain things we can do when it is in our jurisdiction, because it is private property. So, but I'll let him further explain that if that wasn't clear.
Mm-hmm, okay.
Okay, was that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to speak on this zoning application?
I would ask whether the city, after acquiring this land,
Can you
is...
state your name and
Oh,
address?
sorry. Jacqueline Brown, 2302 Riverstone Drive. I would ask whether the city, after acquiring this land, is going to do any kind of environmental impact study on the water equality. We just heard from our floodplains manager that one of the reasons for you to annex this is to gain control and protect our water source, and I applaud him for that concern. But then I also hear that you want to put in potentially even heavier industrial activity next to my drinking water source, and that makes me rather concerned about who and how we're actually going to protect that, because these seem like competing interests to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Elaine Gipple, 2709 Spalding Circle. This isn't my fight, but what I'm hearing you say is the city says it's not my job, it's the county's job because it's private property and everything. What happens when 44 acres with very little green space is paved and buildings on it? Where's all that water going to go? The water needs to be addressed by the county first, and then the city can annex it if they feel like it's no longer a problem. But let the county figure out the problem first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Nobody? Then we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Huddleston, looks like maybe we need to clarify a couple of things. Please, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Can I add one question?
Sure.
And this is to you, Mr. Huddleston. If we don't annex this and it doesn't come into the city and nobody develops the property forever, the problem continues and will exist the way it has currently existed. I think this is more of a solution to the problem because it will mitigate the amount of water that leaves the property, and there will be detention ponds and retention ponds and drainage plan put in place that will help mitigate some of, we see it commonly on properties where there's a flooding next door problem, and we can help mitigate that by improving the stream flow. Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, I think the speakers brought up 2 or 3 things that maybe they need some additional information on. As far as the city committing to resolving a problem, we'll give it the standard of care that we would any other project or property inside the city limits. Obviously, we can't commit to a remedy to a problem that, or a project or an issue that we haven't studied. But we'll have to work within the limits of our abilities as city government to influence the question that they've asked. I'll state again, Beaver Dams on creeks been going on for thousands of years. You know, we've got to look and see if there's a real something at risk. Water running over a floodplain is not a problem for us to go correct. And so we're only going to spend resources and take actions that we would judge that need to be taken, and that's going to be in protection of private property and public infrastructure and public properties. We also have to manage the issue of this is still private property, regardless of the jurisdiction it's in. And for us to act in that situation, we either have to have a compelling public need or the permission of the private property owners. Occasionally we have worked with private property owners to address issues on private property. So I think as far as the question about Beaver Dams, we'll evaluate that like we have all the ones we've been called about and see if there's an action that needs to be taken. I think there was a question then about are we going to do environmental studies, and what I'll tell you about Lytle Creek is we already are studying Lytle Creek. Between us and the state of Tennessee and Rutherford County Stormwater, we have a good bit of information, base information on the quality of Lytle Creek, and we'll continue to do that. Then the next question then was related to, and I think there were 2 questions about the relation to the property if it's developed. Currently, in its current state, as undeveloped property, there is not a stormwater quality requirement to meet, but if a development plan is proposed, obviously the city stormwater ordinance would kick in, requiring protection of the creek, stream bank, detention and water quality management, as we would always require with any development project. And then further, Mr. Smotherman, to your point, if and when a development plan comes through and we have an opportunity to correct a drainage problem or a flooding problem, obviously we're going to use that project as an opportunity to make those improvements as well. Be glad to answer any other thoughts or questions you have on that.
And I think just a general comment regarding the 44 acres being paved. There's currently there's no plan for that at all. We're not looking at any type of development on it right now.
And I think Ms. Kerr might have, Ms. Kerr and our other staff met with the owners here. She might have a statement on any obvious development plans or pending development.
They may be looking at something further on it, but tonight what we're reviewing is just a request for zoning. If the property is annexed into the city, then what would the zoning be for that property? Thank you, Mr. Huddleston.
Ms. Jones, I believe that Mr. Rick Murphy was going to be in attendance tonight, but I don't believe I see him. I think he's representing his family in this application. It's my understanding, and Mr. Anthony or Ms. Kerr may correct me, but I believe this is just a speculative rezoning, annexation and rezoning to bring it into the city to market it for future development.
That's correct. What are the questions from the Planning Commission regarding this application?
Can you make a statement on, or Matt or the planner make a statement on paving? You can't just pave 44 acres. There are requirements that would require permutation. There are requirements that would require green space. You can't just pave 44 acres if you're a developer coming into the city. So.
Yes, that's correct. We have landscaping requirements, open space requirements, formal open space requirements. So yeah, that would be an accurate statement, Mr. Russell.
There are no further questions. I'll make a motion, we approve the application.
Okay. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item C on the agenda is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 297.5 acres located along Joby Jackson Parkway and Elam Road. Betty Harris Dempsey is the applicant. Ms. Rush?
Thank you. Yes, the project area is shown in blue on the attached map. It is located along the north and south sides of Joby Jackson and the west and east sides of Elam Road. It is comprised of 291 acres and also 3,800 linear feet of Elam Road is proposed for annexation for a total of 297.5 acres. The parcels are primarily undeveloped and are used for agricultural purposes. There is one single-family residence on all these acres that is still there and within the study area. Written petitions were submitted by the property owner, Ms. Betty Dempsey and Ms. Elizabeth Dempsey. There is also a companion zoning request to zone this property to general industrial simultaneous with the annexation. Currently, there is no development proposal associated with this request. The study area is located within the City of Murfreesboro's urban growth boundary, and it is contiguous to the city limits, as shown in yellow on the attached map. Staff has included the feasibility study and plan of services with the attachments to the staff report, and it does show that the city can provide services immediately upon annexation. And with future development, it can also provide services with items being improved and provided. Let's see. For tonight, the Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing on this matter of the annexation and discuss and formulate a recommendation for the City Council. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay. We'll open the public hearing for this item. This is to speak on the annexation request for this property, and then we will again have a companion zoning application next. So if you want to speak on the zoning application, that'll be next. So opening the public hearing, and if you would like to speak regarding the annexation, please come forward and state your name and address.
My name is Carol Hughes, and I live out in the county at 124 Lodge Court. This rezoning and annexation has a direct impact on us county residents out in that area with additional traffic. Right now, Joby Jackson and Elam and Butler, the alignment is just a nightmare for us to try and get across and get out on the roadway. And we were wondering if there was going to be any kind of realignment of Elam and Butler Drive, any kind of traffic studies done to improve that before the area starts to get developed. Any kind of traffic cameras may be put up if this does go into the city. And that's basically all I've got.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Hughes. Who's next? Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And Ms. Rush, do you want to comment on the traffic?
So, no, there are not traffic studies done. There's no development proposal at this time. This is just for the annexation of the land. The annexation that is proposed and was studied is to include Elam Road, which is a county road. If it was to be annexed, it would then be a city road and have to be brought to city standards. So those things would be studied at the time. Any future improvements would be made.
Including any realignment that might be needed. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
But the road would probably be redeveloped at the time of the development at the developer's expense. Is that correct?
Correct. Any of the property that fronts along Elam Road, those road improvements would be at the developer's expense. So it would happen as development would come forward.
And it would be advantageous to city and county residents if that Elam Road were to follow the river, probably more adjacent and wind up further away from the interstate so that it would allow for a lighted intersection to take care of the problem that exists today. That would be the hope.
Other comments and questions? Any other, y'all have comments, questions?
I know.
Then we're ready for a motion.
No other questions. I'll make a motion to approve, subject to any and all staff comments.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, our next item is the zoning application for approximately 200.1 acres located along Joby Jackson Parkway and Elam Road to be zoned general industrial simultaneous with annexation. Betty and Elizabeth Dempsey are the applicants. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. The applicants are requesting to zone the subject property to general industrial simultaneous with the annexation. That was the prior item on the agenda. The applicants have indicated that there is no specific development plan proposed for the property at this time. The purpose for zoning the property to general industrial is to attract industrial users and employers to Murfreesboro who are seeking industrially zoned land with good highway accessibility. The subject property is within the unincorporated area of Rutherford County and is located on the north and south sides of Joby Jackson and along the east and west sides of Elam Road. The portion of the property proposed for annexation but not part of the zoning application will automatically be zoned to RS-15, which is single-family residential, upon annexation. And that is because it's currently zoned RM, which is medium-density residential in the county. The general industrial district is intended to provide areas in which the principal uses permitted are wholesaling, warehousing, limited manufacturing, and these are all things that need accessibility to major transportation routes. It also allows, within the general industrial zoning district, some various commercial uses as well as office building uses. So those things would all be consistent within that general industrial district. The adjacent land uses are to the properties to the north, south, and west are in the unincorporated portions of Rutherford County. They are primarily agricultural uses and they're undeveloped. Property to the east is Highway 24 with the on-off ramp. And then land further to the east is industrial and heavy industrial zoning. The land to the west, as you can see on the map, are single-family residential subdivisions. Between the industrial zoning and the residential, that buffer that would be zoned RS-15 is up to like 1,500 feet wide, so it's very wide. And it does include the river as well as railroad tracks are to the west of that. So it would be quite a distance from the housing to the general industrial uses. The future land use map does show this as a light industrial land use designation. The general industrial is consistent with that, even though that is a new zoning district. It is similar in the types of uses that would be supported. It also has in the land use designation, there are areas where it is designated commercial and also office park. Those are not consistent with the 2035 plan, but those uses are allowed in that general industrial area. So the action needed is the applicant is here tonight to provide an overview. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing on this matter and formulate a recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. Chairperson Jones, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Matt Taylor of SEC here in town. I'm accompanied by Mr. John Harney of the Parks, also here in town. We represent the property owner, Ms. Dempsey, and we've got a brief presentation of our proposal to rezone the Dempsey property. We think that you'll find it's a future place of economic development, employment, and commerce for our city and region as a whole. So the existing conditions highlighted, the property is highlighted in yellow here. It's bound by CSX Railroad on the west, and then a portion of the property is bound by I-24 on the east. And then to the north and south are other undeveloped or slightly developed properties, mainly agricultural to the south. Some of the surrounding uses, you see CSX Railroad, you've got Indian Hills Golf Course in the northwest or upper left-hand corner there. You've got Molly, and you get back into the Riches and Pillsbury's as you continue up Butler Drive to the north. Then across the interstate, you get back into Schwann, what I refer to as Perfect Equipment, but I believe they've changed their name, as well as Interstate Cold Storage Warehousing, Amazon, and NHK Seating, to name a few. The property itself is mainly vacant except for the one residential use that Ms. Rush mentioned. About a third of it's in trees or shrubs or scrub. Most of those trees and vegetation are down along the river, which is along the western portion, and that will continue to provide a good buffer between the existing residences to the west and any of our development to the east. The property is bisected by both Joe B. as well as Elam Road. And you'll notice that most of, really, the CSX Railroad is acted as a divide between land uses. To the west of CSX is primarily residential, and then to the east of the railroad is non-residential, which is shown there. The existing zoning backs that up. You can see a lot of yellow and green for our PUDs and RS 12s and 8s to the west of the railroad, and then on the east side of the railroad, you see a lot of grays and reds for our commercial and industrial there. As Ms. Rush said, the 2035 plan, this is generally compliant, and our proposed zoning will allow for the 2035 plan to be enacted through both the business park as well as the industrial uses. The proposed zoning, we have proposed for general industrial in the blue areas, and then for the area in red, which is basically the stream and anything to the west of that, to remain as RS-15. We don't see any real development potential there. Somebody once told me that the best buffer was distance, and so we've tried to provide that. Ms. Rush said portions of this green space are up to 1,600 feet, and so I've tried to provide about 3 locations here to give a general idea of the varying distances. So you're talking 3 to 5 football fields really between the structures and where the zoning lines would be, not necessarily where the use or buildings would be, where those zoning lines would be. And then somebody mentioned during the annexation, the access. I think Ms. Rush did a good job. The major thoroughfare plan has actually committed and planned for this area to be improved for quite some time. Butler as well as Elam has been identified that intersection needs to pull away from the interstate. And so you'll see in the blue lines, the blue dotted lines here from the major thoroughfare plan, that's aimed to be pulled about 1,600 feet plus or minus away from the interstate on and off ramps. I believe TDOT plans possibly some signalization and other interchange improvements at some point in the future. And by moving this away, it would allow us the opportunity to signalize this intersection when that's needed. Both these roads would be at a minimum, they'd be curb and gutter, 3 lanes wide, sidewalks, just like our normal city standard. And then obviously with development, we'd have the opportunity to perform traffic studies based on those uses and demands. And if that road or those sections, or maybe it's just the intersection needs to be wider than 3 lanes, that would be addressed at that time. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you've got now or after the public hearing.
Mr. Taylor, can you go back to the picture? So just so everybody understands, and I understand, based upon what you've depicted here, any site plan that we would see in the future, we would in essence see the dedication in all likelihood of this proposed road, so the person that's developing this property would understand that that's the plan
Yes,
for the
sir.
future based upon what they might develop here.
Yes, sir. Now, as Ms. Rush said, we don't have a definite user here. I will tell you that in the past 5 to 10 years, we have probably talked to half a dozen to 10 potential users on this site, varying from size and intensity, and that has been a part of all of those conversations.
All right,
And now the alignment may change. It may get further from I-24 depending on what the user's needs are, but they understand that that is a very large portion of this project and property.
I think we can, that's a great correction. This is not a fair comparison, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Asbury Road, Medical Center Parkway, if we could have done something about that on the front end, we would have be a lot better off, and I'm glad that we are looking at this now.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Taylor before we open the public hearing?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. All right, we will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak regarding this zoning application for this property.
I just had a couple of questions. My name is Mariah Phillips, and I live at 1332 Dodd Trail, Murfreesboro. A couple of questions that I had was, once this rezoning is approved, is the potential use for this industrial, light industrial? Is that what I understand? That can be for anyone.
Medium, is that what we're calling it? General industrial.
General industrial, so not for residential, from what I understand.
That's right. This
Okay.
is for industrial.
And also in this plan, you're looking at, for any potential infrastructure improvements are going to be the responsibility of the developer, according to what I just understood. Is that true?
Yeah, and we will answer all your questions at the end of your three.
Okay,
At
sure.
the end of the
So
public
I just
hearing,
want to
but-
say, if that is true, then I hope that you consider, that for all future developments, that when communities and neighborhoods and our roads are impacted greatly by development, that you encourage or enforce the developer to take on the burden of the infrastructure instead of the tax dollars paying for that. So thank you. If that's the expectation, that the developer will be paying for the expansion of the roads, I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, we will close this public hearing, and we would like to address the specific issues regarding the developer taking on expansion. I think they do a pretty good job of that, but obviously somebody else needs to explain that. Mr. Blomley, would you like to?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Jones. I would just mention, and I don't know that we can exactly say how the road will be aligned, what modifications will be made, but it is customary for the city, and especially when we have a project on our major transportation plan, that the developer is required to and expected to participate in those improvements. To what extent he must participate is something that is fleshed out as we receive plans and as we review those plans. But it is common and customary for the city to require, to certainly require participation by the developer, whether that's in actual construction, right-of-way dedication, paying fees in lieu of construction, in any number of ways to provide for those improvements, to make provisions for those improvements with his or her development plans. And that also includes whenever there is a substandard roadway that the property fronts on. So in this instance, Elam Road, even if Elam Road were not to be realigned, anytime a development occurs along a substandard road, the development is required to and expected to participate in upgrades to that substandard road in the future. So it's customary for the city to to put at least some of the burden on the developer for those road improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Blomley. I think one of the main differences with this particular application that we're looking at is we are not looking at a specific plan for this property as it is being requested for rezoning. So normally if we're looking at that and all of the roads and everything are being shown on the plan, the developer is taking care of those that we're looking at. And so we're not sitting here talking about the future that we're going to ask the developer to take care of it when it happens. It's on the development plan right there, and the developer is taking care of it. So this is a little different in a whole lot of our public hearings because we don't really have a specific plan at this time. So we're just trying to state a few of the things that we want to make sure happen when that development, whatever it is, comes through for us to look at. So hope that answers your question. What other comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
And I think just for clarification, the in lieu of money that the city would receive would be committed to that roadway. But oftentimes when there's 3 developers who are developing one section of roadway, it makes more sense for the city to take the money in lieu of and to develop the roadway with us developing it than it is to have 3 different developers develop a section of roadway. So it just makes more sense. It's more economical to do it that way. So it's not some grand conspiracy for us to get money out of them. It's really truly trying to correct a problem that currently exists.
And it might be that we would collect that money if we have 3 different developments that take place along an existing county road. We're going to collect from each of those developers as they come along and then eventually do that road. We're not going to piecemeal it along the way. So
I think we should also just clarify, since Ms. Phillips asked about the zoning type, and it's G1, but also a section for RS15, right? GI. Or excuse me, GI, because the agenda only talks about GI. It doesn't. First, I was looking for maybe that was going to be done later. So
yeah.
we didn't make the motion.
So as the property comes in, since we are looking at annexing 297.5 acres, we're only talking about rezoning 200.1 acres. The remaining property, anytime we annex into the city, if there is no zoning request, if it's residential property in the county, it would come in as residential property in the city. So that's what's happening to that remaining property. And the reason we're only looking at a 200-acre zoning application, that's the only part that's being requested to be rezoned to the new general industrial zone. The remaining property would come in as RS15, which is our largest residential zoning.
And that's something that would happen automatically per the zoning ordinance. So because that happens automatically, it wasn't technically a part of their zoning request, so we didn't put that in the heading for the item, but we did put it on the map just to clarify how that property would be zoned if it were to be annexed into the city limits.
Thank you, Ms. Garland. Any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
There are none. I'll make a motion that we approve the proposed zoning, the general industrial, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our next item is a zoning application for approximately 122.19 acres located along Cason Trail, Eastview Drive, and Racket Club Drive to be rezoned from RS10 and RS15 to a planned unit development known as Hidden River Estates, PUD. Blue Sky Construction is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. As indicated, the subject property is located along the north side of Cason Trail, east of Stony Meadow Drive and Dodd Trail and River Rock Boulevard, and adjacent to the west side of the Murfreesboro Greenway Trailhead. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property to develop single-family residential attached units and commercial. The proposal is to construct a total of 602 attached units. There are 4 different house types and styles. Some are 2-bedroom, some are 3-bedroom, some are 4-bedroom. Most of these have garages, some are surface parked. There is a range depending on the product style and the height and the number of stories. The highest end of the attached homes is those that are located along the Cason Trail end of the property, adjacent to the trailway. And those would be 3-story units, 40 feet tall. The buildings would be comprised of brick and stone material, cementitious siding, and pretty much beige browns, muted colors were the palette. Also included in the proposal are single-family residential detached units. There are a total of 18 lots. Those are located adjacent to the floodway up in the upper northeast corner of the property. Those are the long, large, narrow lots that you'd see on the map. Also proposed are 2 amenity centers. One is at the south portion of the development. It would include a pavilion with restrooms, mail kiosk, a swimming pool, picnic area, and bike racks. The second amenity center would be where Dr. John's house is right now, and it would have a clubhouse with 2 swimming pools, a cabana, mail kiosk, picnic area, basketball, tennis court, volleyball court, bocce ball, shuffleboard, as well as the pond would remain with a deck. Also included with the proposal is approximately 15,000 square feet of commercial area. A traffic impact analysis for this development was required. The developer's engineer, Huddleston Steel, had submitted the report. It was prepared August of 2019, so it's very recent, and it was attached to the staff report for reference. The staff had reviewed the traffic impact analysis and had required the developer to provide a couple of additional items. One is a stub road to the Chambers property that would allow for a future connection to River Rock. The revised site plan is provided in a hard copy on the dais before the commission this evening with that area noted. The second item that we had asked the developer to do was to widen Cason Trail to 3 lanes adjacent to the property and conduct those road improvements. Staff attended neighborhood meetings that the developer had held. The most recent one was July 15th, 2019. There was an earlier neighborhood meeting that was conducted back in December 2018 when the project was initially proposed. In addition, staff has also met with subgroups or smaller groups of some of the residents that have expressed interest. In fact, we just met with a group of the residents on September 30th, making ourselves available to answer questions about the project. Adjacent land uses in the zoning surrounding this property are single-family residential to the west and to the north, and the greenways to the east. The future land use map of the Murfreesboro 2035 does show this as urban general residential as the most appropriate land use characteristic. The characteristics in this particular land use does allow for density to go up to 8.64 dwelling units per acre. This project is proposing 5.13 dwelling units to the acre, and the zoning is consistent as well as the density consistent with the future land use map. So for tonight, the applicant's representative is here to provide a much more detailed presentation on the pattern book. The commission will need to conduct a public hearing on the rezoning and discuss the matter and then formulate a recommendation to the city council. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Rush? And then say we're going to hear from Mr. Roundtree. All right. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Jones and Commissioners. My name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here with Mr. Brian Burns, who is the developer from Blue Sky Construction, and Mr. Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering as well, who will be available to answer any questions related to traffic and grading and drainage. I'd like to begin by saying thank you for the opportunity to present to you Hidden River Estates. We're excited about the possibility of this project being constructed, and Mr. Burns has every intention to make it one of the nicest developments in the city of Murfreesboro. So with that in mind, we'll go through the slide presentation. The inception of Hidden River Estates was to be a healthy, quiet, and peaceful living along the river. And from its inception, the vision was to create an active lifestyle community that provides excellent access to the Greenway, excellent access to the Stones River, while organizing all the home clusters around green spaces, common green spaces for the residents who live inside the development to enjoy. The topography of the development basically is a slight pitch from west to east, and as you get closer to the river, which is on the eastern portion of the property, the grades do increase substantially towards the river. Overall, we originally started our development plans with the bottom, basically, if you look at the exhibit on the screen, the 43 acres that is identified on the basically bottom left. That was the original project for Hidden River Estates. After going through Planning Commission, it was determined that we needed more access points for that to be successful as a development. We had originally considered Case and Trail as our primary access point. And then as you move to basically to the northern portion of the site, we're going to provide an emergency access coming off of Eastview Drive. But after looking at that and working with the adjacent property owner, Mr. Burns was able to acquire the additional 78 acres of land, which provided us a third access point, an easy access point on Eastview, as well as the trailhead, the Case and Trail access point as well. In this exhibit, the dark blue line shows the floodway area that will be undeveloped, and it also shows at the bottom portion, the white line is the greenway itself. So really, as far as the greenway is concerned, the primary portion of the site was the original 42 acres, or 43 acres. That was the site most adjacent to the greenway. Right where the two properties come together, that's where the greenway crosses over to the other side of the river and basically goes into the industrial area. As Marina mentioned, it's primarily residential to the northeast and or northwest and south, and then industrial to the east on the other side of the river. We are asking for a planned development, so we'll be a little bit different in terms of the area zoning. The site is serviced by Murfreesboro Electric as well as Murfreesboro Water Resources. There are two sewer easements that go across the site, both on the southern portion and the northern portion. Those are respected in the site plan. As was mentioned, the access points on the northern portion, the access point is Racket Club Drive. On the central portion, the access point is Eastview Drive, and that's shown in the red dot. And then the blue dot is shown on the southern portion of the site, and that's Case and Trail. So those are the three access points that allow for ingress, egress from the potential development. And with that, we'll get into that a little bit more detail in one of the other slides. As far as the northern access point, currently there is this Racket Club Road and Racket Club Drive, and with that there's existing gates that are currently the entry gates to the Johns residence. Those gates, that entry point will be moved further to the south, but it will be very much similar in terms of character as what you see here. But that is currently Mrs. Johns' property. The home below is where Mrs. Johns lives now, and the future of that home is to be a clubhouse upon her moving from the property. Currently, Eastview Drive ends in a cul-de-sac. We'll be extending that cul-de-sac into the property, and that'll be the central access point for our development. And as I mentioned before, the bottom picture shows the greenway crossing the river. There's where the bridge is, and that's identified as kind of the central portion of the projected site. And the southern entry point is on Case and Trail. And it's important to note in the image on the top left, it shows the trailhead sign right at the entrance of the road. And that's going to be relocated much further down the road, closer to where the dog park is currently, and that's shown on the bottom image. One of the concerns the neighbors have had is that we're going to limit access to the Case and Trailhead, and that won't be the case. We will identify a different access point, and those gates will be relocated much closer to the park itself now. private and public roads were a primary concern with the city, and so with that in mind, the yellow bold line is what is going to be considered public roads. And as was mentioned, the new public road will allow access through the property from adjacent owners and will be connecting Eastview Drive to Racket Club Drive. This will help relieve some pressure within the neighborhood itself, but also create a much better distribution of our internal circulation as we leave the site. The blue lines represent private roads, and the dots represent where there'll be gates. This will be primarily a gated community outside of the estate lots, which are along the river where the yellow line goes up toward the east. That will be the only public road that's within the development as far as servicing houses. Everything else will be private, everything else will be gated, and the mail kiosks will be centrally located within the various gated areas. Overall, just the statistics on the site, as was mentioned, Marina mentioned this, there's 120 acres of land that we're looking at. We are asking for a PUD zoning with 620 homes and with a unit density of 1.1 or 5.16 per acre. As we learned through the meeting yesterday, we feel like the density that's going to be allowable for townhomes is around 7 units per acre. So we'll be under what is going to be potentially passed as a new ordinance for townhome developments. There will be 5 different types of homes, and I'll walk through the home types real briefly through the next slides. As Marina mentioned, along the river are what we call the river row homes. They're the largest homes. They're 3-story potential development homes. They're a minimum of 2,000 square feet. They will have garages, rear entry garages from the back, as well as carports, so there'll be parking for 4 cars per unit. And the carports will serve as a patio area on the 2nd floor. So they'll have rooftop patio areas as well as decks that are basically carport covers. They will look like row houses, as was mentioned in the name, and the primary materials will be brick and metal and cement board. This slide shows the front elevation on the top corner on the left, and the bottom is the rear elevation. And that shows the garages on the back as well as that covered carport area that will be performing as a deck. And the top right image shows how the rooftop patio areas will look, basically as a concept. The center section of the development is what we're calling the villas. The villas amount to 196 homes. They're 1,400 square foot minimum. They have surface parking, which is shared, and there's 647 required spaces, and we provided 653 in total. This will be the lesser expensive home type on the project and be central to the development. All home types, no matter what the price point, are going to be connected to green spaces, which was very important from our development strategy. The actual products themselves, the homes will be brick and metal and cement board. They'll be 2 stories in nature, and both the row houses and the villas will have a metal component for any kind of balconies that they may have. The next home type is the landings. These are significant in the fact that these are the properties that will border the adjacent properties. These are a minimum of 2-story high homes, 1,300 square feet. They're 1- and 2-car garages, but they're front entry garages. So in these particular homes, all the rear will be the backyards of the homes, which will be adjacent to the adjacent homeowners. There are 306 required spaces for these homes. We provided 360 spaces. And so as far as the neighbors are concerned, these are the homes that will most directly address the adjacent properties, and we wanted to make sure that that relationship was a back-to-back relationship versus the front of a home facing the back of a home. Overall character of the landings are cement board, decorative garage doors, hardy board siding, primarily brick, and as you can see, various styles of garage doors, and really trying to create a really nice architecture in terms of variety by breaking up the roof lines, providing a lot of undulation in the architecture. So a nice home product. The cottages are another home style that we're offering. And they're 2,500 square foot minimum homes. They're 1,800 square foot minimum homes. They are 1.5 stories with 2-car garages. And really, if we see anything that is age targeted in this development, it's primarily the cottages. And what we're seeing there is the 1.5 stories is really a bonus room up. The primary use of the home will be all on the first floor. Mr. Burns wanted to make it, we batted around a 55 and up component to the development, but decided it would be best just to go ahead and make it 1 floor, but easily accessible for someone who's a senior citizen. Primary materials are consistent with the rest of the development, brick facades, cement board siding as well, and front entry garages. The last home style are the estates, and those are the properties that are adjacent to the river past the greenway. There'll be large lots. A lot of the size of the lot is driven by where the floodway interfaces with the rear of the lots. They will be custom homes, really with no minimum, well, the minimum square footage will be 2,500 square feet, but they'll be highly varied in terms of their style. All the homes will be regulated by an architectural review board. There will also be an HOA associated with the whole development. So although these homes have a little bit more leeway in architectural style, they'll have eyes on them to make sure they are consistent with the character of the development. And these are a few images of the type of home we'd like to see on the estates. And we'd like to note that there'd be both a front entry option and a rear or a side entry option, so to make sure those doors are open for us. As far as the amenities centers are concerned, Marina mentioned those. On the southern portion of the property, we have an amenity center that will basically be a covered pavilion with bathrooms, an adjacent mail kiosk, and a pool area, a picnic area, with adjacent parking. There'll be bike racks there also for the greenway. The second amenity area, as was mentioned, is taking and incorporating the house, the existing home. And that will have a clubhouse, a half-court basketball, a formal event lawn area, pools and cabanas, a shuffleboard area, a bocce ball, sand volleyball, and a picnic area as well. And the pond that's currently on the site will be modified for some of the access road, but we plan on keeping the pond there and making it an amenity with some sort of a fishing dock associated with it. Overall, as Mr. Burns has mentioned to us, that he wants this to be a standard for Murfreesboro, so landscaping will be a really key component on how overall the aesthetics of the development occur. But as far as the primary concern with the neighbors is making sure an adequate buffer has been secured. Right now, we're anticipating a type D buffer along the adjacent property lines, and how that buffer is generated is by keeping the majority of the existing trees as much as possible, as well as wherever there's void spots or blank spots, add an additional plant material to make sure that at the end of the day we have a type D type buffer. That is a 15-foot wide buffer, and again, we want to do our best to preserve as much of the existing vegetation that's there currently. The overall character of the site, these are just a few images of the site amenities. As far as the light standard style, we want to have a signature clock at one of the roundabouts. Roundabouts will be a big part of the circulation pattern internally. We want to have decorative benches, stamped concrete in the circle. We want to do a bunch to make this a very special place and really have a sense of place when we're through with the design. Access points from inside the development to the greenway have been a real concern. Right now, we're proposing 3 access points along the back, and they're identified with the circles, the yellow circles. So one is along right close to the Cason Trailhead, one's in the center of the property, and one's towards the northern portion of, again, where the trailhead is along, where the greenway is along the property. So that's a little deceiving. It's not the whole property. This is basically the southern portion of the project that has the trail access. We want to note that we will have a kayak storage, and Mr. Burns is working with the Parks Department to provide a public access kayak that can be used by the local neighborhoods and anyone using the Cason Trail. That currently doesn't exist. As far as open space is concerned, there's definitely been concern over the density, and we'd like to say that although it's a cluster development, and so the homes will be closer together, obviously they'll be attached, and they're designed around green space clusters. The overall density is a little over 5 units per acre, And we're glad to say that 40% or 40 acres of the 120 acres will be preserved towards green space undeveloped. Now, to clarify that, only about 10 acres is what we consider formal green space that can be used corporately among all the common areas. But cumulatively on the whole development, there'll be 40 acres of land that wouldn't be developed as a result of this type of design we're proposing. As far as the phasing is concerned, right now we have the bright pink, excuse me. The bright pink is the phase 1 areas. Let me see what's going on here. The bright pink, so there's a 1A and a 1B. So right now we're considering 1A to be Cason Trail development and 1B to be right off of the Eastview Drive. And the reason we have the 2 different phases is phase 1 is going to introduce the project and have a pretty diverse product type, home type. Phase 1B will introduce the cottages, which is something Mr. Burns is really excited about, and allows us to go ahead and hit the estate. So we are visualizing in the first 3 years that 1 and 2 would be completed. But that allows us also to create some internal circulation within the development. As far as one thing that's come up is in phase 5, I'll just hit it here because it's a phasing plan. There's a commercial area that is anticipated in the development. I'll hit that slide because it's the next slide, but it's over in phase 5, which is also, it's within the phase 2 portion of the development. And what we anticipate with the commercial area is just to allow neighborhood services to be a part of the community. And this will preclude people having to run out for a lot of different types of items. It'd be like more of a general store. Some of it will be associated with the Amenity Center, so it can help facilitate some of the functions of the Amenity Center. But we liked it to be a small cafe type of area, a place where people can get bread and milk, but more of a general store type of product. And so that, again, keeping internal circulation more prominent within the development and also providing them easy access for the neighbors outside. This will not be, this will just help alleviate some of the traffic concerns that the neighbors have. As far as the impact, economic impact, I won't go through all the numbers, but it's over a $600,000 tax impact on the city of Murfreesboro. So we feel like it could be something that could be a real asset towards the tax base of the city. And as Mr. Burns mentioned, or he well mentioned, it's just something he really wants to do as far as a passion project to make sure the quality is something that's a Murfreesboro standard. So with that, I'm available for any questions you may have. I wanted to run through it so we have time for all the public hearing component. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them. And Mr. Huddleston from Huddleston Engineering would like to come up and speak about traffic if there's no questions for me.
I've got just a couple of questions. Sorry, Mr. Roundtree. So on the phasing plan, are you saying that 1A is going to come in off the Cason Trailhead, that access point, and for 1B, are you saying that both the Eastview Drive and the Racket Club Drive access points would be done with phase 1B?
Mrs. Jones, at this time right now, we're currently just planning on the Eastview Drive access point being the primary access point for 1B.
Okay.
Racket Club would be a part of.
It does say differently in here, in the plan book. It says Eastview and Racket Club Drive.
Okay. Yeah, it's just Eastview Drive currently in phase 1B.
Okay. Okay, and that was the other question that says right there, separate mail kiosks provided in each of these phases. So that's the way the mail kiosks.
We originally had them at the Amenity Centers, but it made a lot more sense because it's gated to have each of those gated communities have their own kiosk area to take some pressure off the Amenity Centers and kind of disperse the mail crowd.
And just a general question, I can't name the specific, all the different little areas, but you know, where we usually get concerned, where we're talking about mainly the trash pickup. So are all of the driveway areas and garages and every place, those things that we normally have concerns about, is that all addressed and taken care of in here?
Basically what we're anticipating, because it's gated, that'll all be private haulers. And yes, Mr. Burns designs the home so the garages can accommodate any kind of a roll-away type of garbage container.
Perfect. Public or private, we just don't want all that trash.
So you saying the public roads are private hauler too?
We're working through the public roads in themselves, just because it's only 18 units that are really public, those estate lots. They'll probably have their own individual gates as well, so there's a little discussion with the city as far as whether those are going to be private or public. We're glad to make them private hauler as well, because the whole development will be private hauler, but the city may want us to do the public service. And that was another question with the cottages. Would the cottages actually potentially have public services as well for trash? And that's still a little bit of discussion, but right now we're currently planning on it being a private hauler.
Mr. Roundtree, on page 12, you've got a gate located where two public roads intersect. Is that a mistake?
Excuse me, Mr. Smotherman.
This would be at the end. There. Oh, I see.
Probably supposed to be up here somewhere.
I see
don't
right
know.
there.
It shouldn't be there, though, I don't think.
I'm sorry, are we talking towards the bottom portion?
Kind of in the middle section there, where at the bottom of the 18 homes, right there, there's two public streets that run into each other.
Yeah, that is that's an error.
Is that an error? Okay.
Yeah, that's just, that will be a public access
Okay,
road.
but that'll be removed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Roundtree? And then Mr. Huddleston's got some more information for us.
Thank you, Chair Jones. Good evening, and good evening to members of the Planning Commission. I'm Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering. As has been previously stated, we did have a number of neighborhood meetings on this project, and one of the bigger topics of discussion has been traffic, so I wanted to address that here with you tonight. It was a topic of your discussion in our last public hearing when we met on this property, and we were directed to go back and see what we could do about providing more access to our project. In order to solve that, the developer has contracted with the Johns family to buy the Johns property, and that allows us to give at least 3 accesses for this project instead of just the one we had previously. We identified with staff 4 critical intersections that we needed to look at in the immediate vicinity of this project: Cason Trail and Stony Meadow Drive and River Rock Boulevard, Cason Trail and River Rock Boulevard, and Racket Club Drive and River Rock Boulevard. So per the Institute of Transportation Engineers, we performed a traffic impact analysis. What that means is we counted the existing traffic that was out on the roadways, and especially at these intersections. We generated the projected traffic that this development will cause. We distributed that traffic and assigned it to the adjacent roadway network, and more specifically, assigned it to those existing intersections. We found that with the existing traffic, all turning movements operated with levels of service A and B, which is very good. When we added our project traffic to those existing intersections, all turning movements continue to operate at levels of service A and B, which is still very good, except for 2 movements at Cason Trail and River Rock Boulevard, which were already within 2 seconds per vehicle of a level of service C. They now tripped over, adding 3 seconds per vehicle, which made them levels of service C, but that is still very acceptable levels of service during peak periods. We analyzed these intersections during the AM peak hour and the PM peak hour during the normal weekday. No separate turn lanes were required in any of these 4 intersections because we did get those good levels of service. We did, however, recommend improvements to Cason Trail. That was our original main access, and it is still one of the main accesses for the property. We recommend that a 10-foot multi-purpose trail be constructed along the south side of Cason Trail to the Cason Trail Greenway trailhead. We also recommend that the lighting system be improved along there. We recommend that standard MED Murfreesboro Electric lighting be provided along with the standard Murfreesboro Electric poles And also, we recommend that that electricity be put underground instead of overhead as it is today. In addition, staff had a couple of things they recommended that we do. One of them was put a stub street into the Chambers property, and we're able to do that. I think you have a hard copy of a new design, and the only difference between that and what's in the pattern book is providing that connection to the Chambers property. City staff also said we need to 3-lane Case and Trail to the trailhead. We went back and checked, and yes, that pavement's only about 25 feet wide there, and so we are going to widen it to 33 feet. I want to make sure to point out that those are expenses. All those expenses will be put on the developer and not on the city of Murfreesboro or the taxpayers. There's a lot of talk about Old Fort and Case and Lane. It's a very busy intersection. There's about 40,000 cars going through it a day. Our traffic up there would not even be 4% of what that is. So that's more of what I would call a regional intersection. And as we discussed in our previous public hearing, those types of intersections are things that the city is constantly looking at because we all know it's a problem and we're all looking for ways to remedy it. One way that has been incorporated in order to remedy that and other intersections and other arterials in our city, we've got a new major thoroughfare plan. We call it the 2040 plan that outlines big improvements that can happen, and the city explores those daily that help traffic situations such as that. And in particular, for that location and for 99, we have a couple of bridges over I-24 between 96 and 99 that are in the major thoroughfare plan. If we can get one or both of those done in the next few years, I think it'll greatly help the traffic situation west of town, because right now, if you want to go to the interstate in this area, you've got to go to the State Route 96 interchange on 24 or the State Route 99 interchange on 24, and if you want to go to town, you got to go through those two interchanges. If we can provide one or both of these bridges, we'll be able to get to town without having to go through those interchanges. This time I'll be happy to answer any questions about the traffic report.
Bill, what would be the linear feet approximately of changing Case and Trail? I mean, I get the 3-lane piece, but how many feet are we talking about that we would widen it to 3 lanes?
I haven't measured the length of it, but our frontage is basically the entire length of Case and Trail.
Okay.
So we're going to improve it all. There's no use improving most of it and not getting the connection to the public street to the west. So.
Okay.
Mr. Austin, I know that Case and Trail Street's a 25-foot wide street, but that Racket Court Club Drive is also a 25-foot street. So is there any discussion about improvements there? I know that's not necessarily the developer's responsibility, but I know that's a challenge.
Right. We looked at it, and the levels of service are good there, so we're not showing that any are needed based on this development. The traffic just isn't there to warrant doing major improvements on Racket Club itself. Now, if you do the bridge, one of the bridges that's proposed over I-24 that I was discussing, then you probably need to look at something on River Rock as well.
Mr. Huddleston, could you repeat for me the 4 intersections that were in the study?
Sure, they're on, I don't guess you have a copy of the study itself, or maybe you do, but it's on page 16. The 4 intersections are Case and Trail and Stony Meadow Drive, Stony Meadow Drive and River Rock Boulevard, Case and Trail and River Rock Boulevard, and Racket Club Drive and River Rock Boulevard. If you happen to have the study and you look at figure 3 on page 5, those intersections are circled on that figure.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Huddleston? Okay, thank you, Mr. Huddle.
Thank you.
So at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Remember, you'll come forward, state your name and address. You each have 3 minutes, since it looks like the majority of people here tonight came to talk about this. So just notice around you, a lot of your neighbors and friends here would like to speak, so if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes. And again, as we've stated earlier tonight, we'll try to make note of all your questions, and we will address those at the end of the public hearing. So just give us your questions, but we will not be answering each of them individually as we go through each of your comments. So the public hearing is now open, and we'll ask whoever would like to come forward and speak. Here we go.
I guess I'll start.
All right.
I'm Tavener McKelly. I live at 1941 Stony Meadow Drive. And this whole thing started in December with a Facebook page being created, just mainly to spread the word to the neighbors in the neighborhood who had not heard about the community meeting. Since December, the petition that was created has gained, as of today, 7,682 people have signed it, and 1,000 people, and plus over 1,000 people have joined the Facebook page out of concern over this development. It's a very beautiful development. It's just not the right place for this development. Rather than talking about all the reasons why it should be approved, we'd like to just talk about the reasons that it should not. We have heard from experts that the sewers are close to capacity, traffic in this area is over capacity, schools are close to capacity, electricity is close to capacity, and even more important, this acreage is in a high-risk floodplain. FEMA is encouraging builders to stop building in floodplains because the risk is higher than ever. Even Nashville and many other cities have signed up to participate in a program to buy homes out of the floodplain to avoid the cost. Since December, many longtime homeowners in the group have already given up hope that this might not be approved, and they've decided to move. Many of them are going to have already put their homes for sale, or will be doing so as soon as school is out. So what that means is that you're losing longtime homeowners from this neighborhood. Several of those people have said that they're going to keep their homes as rentals. 2 people on our street just moved out completely this week. There are now two more empty homes on our street. Both are going to be used as rentals. That means that Murfreesboro is losing the type of residents that are willing to come out to meetings like this and put time and energy and effort into speaking up. I don't know if we have any rental people in the group, but I know that a lot of them, when we've asked them to help us and join our group, they've said, no, we're just renting. So that would concern me if I were you. We've heard that the traffic study was done. As you probably know, we tried to raise enough money to do a real traffic study. And I say real because we contacted 9 different firms all over Tennessee and outside of Tennessee as well, and asked, what is a traffic study? What goes into a traffic study? We got...
Time's up, so hurry.
Okay.
Go ahead, hurry.
We got a lot of responses saying that a traffic study should always include the 2 main intersections. We've heard that their traffic study does not include those intersections because we already know they are an F. They're that bad. Why make it worse? You're adding to a situation that is going to be a safety problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment.
I'm Bob Gale. I live at 2202 Racket Club.
lived there for about 17 years. I've witnessed flooding in that area. It does get wet. I didn't come prepared, so forgive me for my inability to public speak. But I didn't see water retention in his plans. I didn't see anything on drainage or anything of that nature. That's a number one concern of mine. Now, where we live, I've seen the water come up too close to the house onto my property. I was able to help that out a little bit, but that didn't help my neighbors down the stream. I'd also like to say, currently, it takes anywhere of 20 minutes for me to go 2 miles down the road if I wanted to go from Racket Club to Lowe's, just to go shopping at Lowe's. It's a 20-minute drive. Get through Cason Lane and so on and so forth. To add any number of cars in that quantity would be, in my mind, ridiculous. It'd be almost impossible to bear. There would have to be an alternate if you chose that site. That's about all I had to say, but the traffic, one more question, though. I do have a question.
Sure.
What time of year was this study taken? Was it during school? The traffic in there does increase during certain times of the year. And I've got a feeling, based on the date that was given, that this may have been studied, this traffic study may have been on the lesser side when traffic isn't quite as bad. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Gale.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Jones, I've rehearsed this, so I've got 2 minutes and 11 seconds, so should get it in right. My name's Mike Green. I live on Gaston Court. And I just want to ask the commission, how can we ignore the warning signs of our earth getting warmer and just consider destroying all of these trees? The loss of bird and wildlife will be catastrophic to our city and to our area. And one of the main reasons that people are moving to Murfreesboro, one of the main reasons that it's such a, I've heard different stories that it's like the #1 growing county in the country, is that they come for the natural beauty of our city and the progressiveness and not for concrete and traffic. There's no sidewalks to protect the residents now. With more cars speeding through, someone's going to get hurt. River Rock is a speedway with cars going well over the speed limit, and there's never a police presence. I've watched commission meetings from the past, and for almost 100% of all the requests that are approved, this is wrong and is not good for our quality of life. I'd like to address 2 comments that were made earlier about, in our earlier meeting, about this not being Mayberry anymore. Boy, that's the truth. In Mayberry, they made decisions that helped the residents and protected the environment, not swayed by money. Also, the Greenway is not a paved sidewalk. That's not the Greenway. It was intended for people to get away and enjoy nature and relax, not to be destroyed by out-of-control building on both sides of the river now. This practice was not what was envisioned when the Greenway was built. Which council do we appear before when a child or an entire family is going to get hit by a speeding car, and it's going to happen? Which council do we appear before when police, fire, and ambulance can't get through the traffic gridlock to help the people that need the help? Which council do we appear before when someone is hurt or killed by the ever-present road rage every day? Every day. The city has laws that tells me what I can and cannot do with my land. Why does that not apply here? Why doesn't this commission represent the majority of the people who live here instead of the interests of just one group, the builders and the developers? Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you respectfully to protect our past and protect it, to preserve our past and protect it, be respectful and responsible of our future, and do not approve this development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
I'm Robert Barkley. I live down by Central High School, 215 North University. And when I first looked at the development, I thought that'd be nice to live in for the people that have the money to buy the house. However, they're using expensive public land that we developed as a greenway to enhance their development. And what do we get? Traffic, the highest buildings on the development are right up against the greenway. We don't want to look at that. You know, that is poor protection of public interest. You have a jewel in Murfreesboro. There's very few cities that have the greenway and that has the ability to be expanded, and had the developer said, well, you know, I consider that greenway, but so I will give some of my property and maybe kick the price point up if they have to, but I'll give my property for a bigger easement. And 15 feet is not an easement, because you can just about spit that distance. So based on that, I would say don't approve it as it stands.
Thank you.
John Boone, the 2126 Eastview Drive, right at the end where I think the main entrance is going to be. Those guys were talking theory. I'm going to talk reality. I'm an airline worker. We have TSA unlimited money for gates. I can't tell you how many times those gates fail, and all the pilots, we have to get to work. It backs up, they start blowing horns. I'm 4 doors down from the end, so I don't think the gated community is going to work. Also, you have these beautiful houses that look like, you know, Victorian houses. Nobody's going to build that house across the street from townhouses. Now, crime, I travel all over the world. I go to Singapore, where if you deal in drugs, you get killed. All those green areas, all those basketball courts, even in Singapore, is a hangout for kids, drugs, theft, and I know everything sounds great. And now we're talking about commercial space, so now there's even more cars, people going to work. I'm worried about crime and cars coming right through. And I moved here 3 years ago because my buddy said, hey, you want a nice place to live? Moved to Murfreesboro. So I left Louisville, Kentucky, 23 years. I had a 26-acre farm. I moved here. I absolutely love my house on Eastview Drive. I already contacted a realtor who sold me the house, told him what was happening. He goes, I'm sorry, your property value is going to go down the tubes. I beg you not to grant this zoning.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Rita Gale. I live at 2202 Racket Club Drive, right off of River Rock. Our neighborhood is not a throughway street. It is a cul-de-sac. I live on that cul-de-sac. I live about 6 houses from the Johns property. I know the gate well, I know the property well, I knew Dr. Johns well. And he and I spoke many times about the tranquility of our neighborhood and how safe it was for our children in our neighborhood to play. And we have 2, maybe 3 cars per resident in our neighborhood. And we feel like the traffic is bad enough. Starbucks, as you know, has opened up there on Cason Lane and River Rock. And the light going either way is ridiculous. And we're blocked half the times from turning left onto Cason Lane because people are blocking the interstate there. You also know that New Salem Highway is being expanded to a 4-lane highway. We're dealing with all of that, but traffic is horrendous. I don't care what these surveys say or traffic assessments are talking about. I suggest that all of you and the Planning Commission take the time to check it out yourself. And the entry points that they're making is not just through streets. They're making it a through street. And the noise factor, 10 years of construction in our backyards, where the roads are so narrow you can't hardly pass one another. We drive 15 miles an hour, we try to, in our neighborhood. Why? Because there's children playing. The Greenway is a natural area where we all go to visit families. We invite families into town. We go down to the Greenway for peace and quiet, for tranquility. You're taking away all the nature out of this. When does the quality of life get diminished by development and greed and so-called progress? That isn't progress when you're ruining the tranquility and the safety of your citizens in this town. It's not right, and I'm asking you sincerely, consider this if it was your home that you love, the neighbors you love, the greenway and the animals and the wildlife that you love. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gale.
Good evening. I'm Wanda Hendricks. I live at 1543 Dodd Trail. I'd like to address what I consider a very serious matter that has not been addressed this evening, nor was it addressed in the February public meeting. I've closely looked at the recent online plans for Hidden River Estates, and I have a simple question. Where is the separate, dedicated construction entrance or entrances for this development? During our community meetings, Mr. Roundtree and Mr. Burns have not been able to tell us how many acres are going to have to be built up out of the floodlands before they can even start building. Now, and we recognize that it requires another engineer to do the studies to determine how many acres, how many truckloads of rock and gravel it's going to take. But to make this land buildable, not all of it, but a large number of acres, it's going to require hundreds and hundreds of dump truckloads, large rock, gravel, then dirt, that's going to have to be brought from the outside through the neighborhoods into this development. Now, when we've had these meetings, and Mr. Roundtree was questioned, he would say things like, that's the city's problem, or that's a city thing, when we would question him about the downside of the trucks using Case Trail. It's a city thing. And I didn't understand exactly at the time what he was saying until I talked to my I have a trade company, and I talked to our commercial insurance rep, and he explained to me that it being a city thing is the fact that there's not a law that requires a construction company to automatically provide a dedicated construction entrance. That falls back on the city and its laws to do that for us. And in the February public meeting, the Hidden Rivers project was tabled until Mr. Burns could come up with an emergency exit from the property, exit and entrance, so that the fire and the police department could serve the residents of the new development. And out of concern for their safety, you said, work that out, come back. Well, we are the residents of the adjoining neighborhood who live there right now. And so with there not being a dedicated construction entrance, if our neighborhood streets are going to become that construction entrance, where's our safety? With hundreds and hundreds of truckloads of rock, gravel, and dirt before there's even that first house built. Going down our streets where we walk, we stroll the babies on the strollers, we ride our bicycles, children play. You'll find basketball goals and kids playing basketball. We are going to be face to face with these trucks. And over 7 to 10 years of building and development, that's not a matter of if something happens, but when. Now, there he can.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. Is that anything else specific you need to say?
Yes, I had a couple of suggestions for construction entrance. The city wants to put a drive over beside the old racket club. How about let that be one of your first construction entrances? Mr. Burns can join with you. Part of the plan that the city wants anyway. Or go back to World Outreach, buy a right-of-way all the way to Salem. But please, 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 if you feel you have to do this, please give us dedicated construction entrance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council, my name is Warren Tormey. I live at 733 North Spring Street in downtown Murfreesboro. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to begin with what seems like an aside, but it really isn't, so please bear with me. I've been fortunate to be included in the working group for the Preserve Our Green Spaces effort, and I just wanted to compliment my cohorts, all of the meetings through the summer, all of the phone calls, all of the planning, all of the efforts to strategize, and all of the, the sincere effort to really preserve their quality of life. It's been one of the great honors of my life to be included in this, and I just wanted to recognize their efforts right now and all of the passion that you hear in this very emotional issue. It's real, and it's coming from people who have sacrificed evenings, weekends, and have cut into work hours to be a part of this effort to make our case here tonight. So I wanted to begin with that, and after that lofty statement, it's my job to bring us down into the sewer, unfortunatately.
In the next 2 minutes, yes, thanks.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to point out, I emailed each of the council members a plan. I've been sort of the archivist for our group, and one of the things I wanted to point out is in that handout that each of you were given, section 4A, the article by Jason Reynolds in the Murfreesboro Post from September 19th. It's all about Murfreesboro's running low on sewer capacity. And if you turn the page to 4B, that's a Murfreesboro Water and Resources Department sanitary sewer allocation study. The date is July 2019. This is a city record, and I realize we talked about this in our informal meeting with the city officials on Monday night, and I realize there's some plans, but this report concludes that we just don't have the infrastructure. And if you read that section of the report, the case study neighborhood is the very neighborhood we're talking about that's going to be affected by this. The Cason Lane, the New Salem Cason Lane corridor, that's the neighborhood that is addressed as the case study. I'm going to just conclude here by pointing this out and by saying we don't have the sewer infrastructure, we don't have the traffic infrastructure for this project. We're lacking on a number of other fronts as well. So please do keep that in mind as you deliberate on this project and on Murfreesboro's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Higgins. I live at 718 Oakwood Circle. I can see the third entrance of the property, the north entrance, from my front porch. We're less than 100 yards from that north entrance. First, we understand that development will occur on this property, and we are not here to oppose it entirely. Rather, the question is one of density and why the developer should be entitled to increased development rights. Under current zoning, as the developer stated when we met with him on Monday, they are entitled to approximately 410 single-family homes. The zone change would guarantee a significant number of increased units by right. And under the current conceptual development plan, the developer is requesting approximately 200 additional units, more or less. We don't understand why the city would grant this request when the developer is already entitled to over 400 homes under the current zoning. This request comes at the expense of hundreds of neighbors, homeowners, and taxpayers who do not want increased density, even at 200 homes. This development offers the city a clear opportunity to consider and respond to the public's concerns regarding the direction of its neighborhoods and community, especially when a specific plan like this appears to negate any of its public benefits. The following things we know are true. One, the developer can build 410 homes without a zone change. And two, the zone change will significantly increase neighborhood impacts. These impacts include increased traffic impacts and related safety hazards during the construction and operation, school impacts, sewer impacts, electrical impacts, sanitation impacts, environmental impacts, noise impacts, air quality impacts, and truckloads of dirt running through our neighborhoods for 10 years over the course of 3 phases and lasting over 10 years. What are we asking? First, we ask you to not recommend approval of the zone change to the City Council. There are sufficient development rights under existing zoning. Additional houses mean additional impacts on existing neighborhoods, residents, and constituents in the neighborhoods that the neighborhoods cannot support. You can minimize those impacts by holding to the existing zoning and not recommending overdevelopment of this area. Second, we ask that the city require the developer to provide full transparency to the public regarding project impacts under the zone change, especially traffic, schools, and public services, similar to a plan of services. And by the way, the traffic study was supposed to be posted on the website so that everybody here could review it prior to public hearing. It was not posted. Third, the city be fully aware of project impacts and mitigation before it approves a zone change that cannot be taken back. And fourth, last sentence, that developer identify and add mitigation to minimize impacts, especially for traffic and public safety improvements to these neighborhoods as expected by the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins.
I'm Craig Higgins. I also live at 718 Oakwood Circle. I can also see the property Mr. Burns purchased from my front porch. That property is zoned the same as my property, and it's the same zoning as all of my surrounding neighbors. Mr. Burns has no legal right or legal expectation of a zoning change. He is not legally entitled to a change of zoning. No citizen is. Mr. Burns met with members of our group this past Monday. He told us that he and his partner, Judge Howard, spent over $2 million on this property. When we asked him what he was going to build if he did not get the zoning change, he told us he didn't know because he'd never even considered it. Imagine spending over $2 million and being so sure you were going to get exactly what you wanted from the city government that you didn't even bother to do the simple math and figure out what you could legally build given the existing zoning. What could possibly give a man such confidence with that much financial risk on the line? I would put it to you that no man, despite his wealth, despite the fact that he and his partner are millionaires, no man could possibly have the confidence to invest so much in a project without even considering the alternative, unless he believed that the zoning change was merely a formality. The Planning Commission saying no to this zoning change takes nothing away from Mr. Burns. He bought this property knowing full well what the existing zoning was and knowing it was the same as all of his surrounding neighbors. If he has to build to the existing zoning, he and Judge Howard lose nothing. They lose nothing. They will still build hundreds and hundreds of units. They will still make millions and millions of dollars. All of these people in these lime green shirts, all those people who signed that petition, we want to believe in our government officials. We want to believe that they value the ethics of representative democracy, that the voice of one wealthy man is not louder than the voices of thousands of regular, middle-class, blue-collar people. Commissioners, you can restore the belief we had in our city officials. You can restore the faith of your constituents. And all you have to do is nothing. Just tell one wealthy individual that he has to play by the same rules as all your other constituents. Tonight, the commission members have the opportunity to show the people of this community that you're not a rubber stamp for wealthy developers. We're waiting to believe in you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Nope, no clapping.
That's a tough one to follow. I'm not nearly as good a public speaker as he is. Again, I'm Jacqueline Brown. I live at 2302 Riverstone Drive. It's right at the corner of Riverstone and Eastview, so I will be staring down one of those entrances that was once a quiet cul-de-sac that I could walk my dog in, and now I will be dodging cars in. So obviously that is a change to what I bought into the neighborhood for. So you are affecting my quality of life by changing that. Now, I understand that a lot of these changes were made in an attempt to accommodate our concerns. But as you can see, they don't really address all of the issues that we continue to bring up. I'm not going to belabor those. I'm going to bring up an additional new one, is that, you know, what's really bad for crime isn't just, you know, rental properties. It's empty properties. He's talking about this development over 10 years. What happens if we have another economic crash? The market drops out. Now what happens? We are left with partially developed areas, areas that are already blighted and torn down from all the bush hogging that he's already done. I would argue that the city, if they are going to move forward with any development of this land, regardless of whether they change the zoning or not, needs to have a higher insurance down payment sort of on this land for what's going to happen to it should there be an economic downturn and they can't develop all of it, because 10 years, a lot of things can happen in 10 years' times in terms of the real estate market. And then the city and we, the neighbors, are going to be left holding the bag for this development if proper insurances aren't put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
My name is Mariah Phillips, and I'm at 1332 Dodd Trail. For 10 months, our neighborhood has come together to fight this development. Hundreds of residents have gotten together for meeting after meeting, community meetings, neighborhood meetings, picnics at the park. It's been incredible for the growth and development of the community that already existed in that area. So if you've done anything good, it's to bring our community together even stronger. But here, what we have been facing with the last 10 months. A development that has been poorly planned despite the pretty pictures, and that's going to have a grave impact that has not been addressed. The traffic impact study, which was mentioned a moment ago, was done, I believe, in early August. And I don't think that it was done, we don't know actually when it was done. We haven't seen it. It was supposed to be published, as said before, but we haven't seen it to even know what kind of questions to ask regarding that. Now, I don't know who made the mistake on that, not making sure that it wasn't available to the public. But either way, before this should be approved, the residents should be able to comment on the traffic study. Because without it, it calls to question the validity of the study, and the fact that Huddleston Steel performed their own traffic study also puts to question some conflict of interest. Something that's important to keep in mind. Also mentioned tonight was the widening of Cason Trail by 3 lanes. So my question is, will the developer be annexing existing homes to expand the roads on Cason Trail to extend all the way to River Rock, because that's where most of the traffic impact is going to be? In addition, if you ever attend the Cason Trailhead during an average Saturday afternoon during the summer, or when many of the events are happening, Cason Trail, between the trailhead and Stony Meadow, there's cars parked along that. So if we're going to be closing that road for parking, then the city of Murfreesboro is going to have to come up with an alternative parking location, or that trailhead is going to be negatively impacted. And so that's something to think about for the future as we're approving this project. I do have a question about the potential cost of these homes. When it was first rolled out back in December, the average cost was going to be between $350,000 and $650,000. And so I want to point out that as our community, specifically the Cason Lane community, has been losing residents, partially due to this impending development, we have had more rental properties and vacant homes in our neighborhood. And I also know, and many of you do, because many of you are realtors or involved in the real estate market, that real estate is slowing, especially for those middle-level homes here in Murfreesboro and across the area. So if you are going to approve the 620 additional homes in that high-end market, just know that there may be some vacancies in the future. So there might not be millions of dollars made after all. I want to also say that my message has always been about making sure that our city planners, you guys, are focused on smart development. This project has not been smart the entire time. I talked about the current parking at the Cason Trailhead, what's going to happen with the expanding roads. We haven't seen the traffic impact on the major roads at Cason Trail and River Rock. We haven't seen the traffic at Cason Lane and River Rock. All of those things are impacted by us every day. But here's something that actually disturbed me more than anything else.
And
with smart development,
wrap it up, please.
This particular project has had so many errors that you guys pointed out even tonight. So many typos and misstatements and missing information. If we believe that with all the money and the professionals and the people working on this proposal for almost a year now, that they have not taken the time to be consistent with fixing the errors in their own proposal, how can we be assured that they're going to be consistent with making sure that this development is done with caution, unlike the carelessness that his proposal has been put together? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. You can thank Ms. Brown for a couple of her extra minutes that went over to you. Who's next?
My name's Dennis O'Neill. I live at 713 Oakwood Circle. From my deck, I'll be able to see all the construction. One thing that has been mentioned a little bit, here's an anecdote that goes with it. Sewer systems, how wonderful our sewer system is. Our sewer system on Oakwood Circle is so bad that you have to send a truck out every week or two to suck it out, and you've been doing that for 5 years. If I can't imagine adding 600 more to that. It's terrible. Everybody knows the sucker truck. We hear it, oh, there it is. And this is right, if you don't know where Oakwood Circle is, it starts and ends on Racket Club. It probably should have been called Racket Club Circle. So we're going to be dramatically impacted with all that. I've lived there for about 37 years. We're talking about moving, unless you all can help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Hearing a lot from me tonight. I'm Mary Ellen Sloan. I'm at 1545 Nathan Court. And as you know, I don't live in this neighborhood, but I'm a concerned citizen. And I brought my tax bill, which I just got in the mail, which I was treated to a big increase in this year. And you all have to do a better job of planning. You just have to understand that the citizens can't take on the infrastructure costs while developers walk away with the profits, because these costs are significant. There's all the physical infrastructure, and then there's a social infrastructure like schools and parks and, you know, fire and police. And you all are passing those costs on to us, and it's not working for this community. No more high-density rezoning. They can build what they're entitled to build, as everybody has said, and we can all walk away. But the high-density zoning is too much. Everybody in the city is talking about it, and it's not working for us. You all really need to dial it down, and people can build what they're entitled to build, and the rezoning should not be a rubber stamp. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sloan.
Good evening. My name is Elaine Gipple. I live at 2709 Spalding Circle, which is a cul-de-sac that dumps onto Racket Club Drive. I'm a block from Cason Lane. Sometimes I can't even get out of my subdivision for traffic being backed up all the way to Countryside subdivision. Naming this property project Hidden River Estates is just so appropriate. It's landlocked. No, it's road locked. They had to invent roads to get in and out of this property. And they all dump into subdivisions, single-family dwelling. I can't believe you can go in the middle of an area and say, oh, I'm going to build 620 houses here. And the traffic study, when and if we ever get to see it, I don't think addressed the intersections that need to be addressed. We haven't even realized the traffic that's going to come to the new overpass behind the racket club. Let's wait and see what that does to the neighborhood. That's going to be immense, and it's going to come down Racket Club Drive. I may not even be able to get out my cul-de-sac to get onto Cason Lane. Well, don't approve the additional multifamily dwelling things. If he wants to build 400 homes, I guess we can't do anything because we didn't stop him from buying this land. And I'm still upset because I didn't get a shirt.
Thank you, Ms. Giffel.
Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Jonathan Z, or Dr. Jonathan Zayas. I moved here in 1994. I left Texas, where I'd served as a city manager, a dean, and an administrative provost. I came to take a position in Nashville in a commensurate position as a university administrator and professor. And I served faithfully, but I made the choice to live in Cason Lane. Now, many of my colleagues in Nashville said I was crazy. Some of them have had children shot and killed. Some of them have had home invasions. I have headed up police departments as a city manager. Do you realize the consequence of having someone killed in a home invasion or a child shot? Do you realize bringing 1,000 to 2,000 more people into a small area? I've also served as a K through 12 principal. It's going to be a load on the school. And I have written city plans. I developed a number of master plans for the cities. And I've been in cities where there were complete devastation from Hurricane Allen and others in some of the most damaging hurricane forces that ever came in. So the risk is we always say this, risk is the price we pay for opportunity. What you're doing here is you're bringing in a tremendous level of risk. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but you need to be aware that you are individually and corporately liable for any of those risks that come up in the future. If these individuals took their property values of hundreds of homes, and let's say that they're valued by 10, 15, 20, 30% because of all this development, they could actually develop a class action suit and come against you. So I caution you. And I'm currently a resident. I've stayed a resident since 1984. My children have been raised here. I have a daughter and 3 beautiful sons. They wouldn't like me calling them that, but they're good-looking guys. And my daughter's a great lady as well. She's a CPA. And so all of my kids have done well in school. But I made the choice to live in Murfreesboro. Back then, we had 2 lanes, going and coming. And I remember many, many hours on the road, sitting in traffic, because I chose to live in Murfreesboro. Now, you may not live in Cason Lane, but back then, it was one of the best schools at Cason Lane, and it had some great opportunities for children. You are destroying a neighborhood, and the risk of that is so significant, you'd better think very seriously. Currently, I'm the president of the American Council. I have contacts at the Department of Justice and other places in Washington. I was nominated, and I was one of the first to nominate our current president. I stand behind him today. If this goes through, I would suggest that those contacts be made, because you are destroying a neighborhood, and these people have proven it. So good luck. I hope you consider very seriously the risk. And God bless you, because remember, we all work for him.
Thank you. Who's next?
My name is Linda Stevens. I live on North Manny Avenue, and I've been accused of being a tree hugger and an environmentalist, and that's what I want to talk briefly about. Have you all enjoyed this warm weather we've been having? You know why that's happening? Because we are doing nothing to control it. The trees that were shown in the slides we saw won't be there after all these extra houses are going to be built. Those trees take the carbon out of the air and store it safely in the ground rather than letting our world get as hot as it is. Duh. So why are we doing this? The original building, what you had approved before, was fine. But now with this very severe overcrowding in this very vulnerable area, I think you're making a big mistake. There's no way our air is going to be cleaner that we can stop getting a yearly emissions test on our cars if we're putting this many more cars into a very small area. Please consider turning this down unless there's a complete impact. Everything that everybody has said tonight, but also let's stress the environment, because that's not only us, it's our kids too, and our grandkids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Kirk. I live at 707 Oakwood Circle. Been there 20 years. I don't know if Bill, where Bill went, but I don't know if Bill has looked at our street. We're 23 and a half feet wide. You're looking to put another, I wrote this down. Well, if he's putting 254 units into section 5 and 1B, you're looking at 508 cars potentially coming out of our streets. We have 37 homes in Oakwood Circle in that area right there on Racket Club. 37 homes. Now you're putting 250 more homes, or what did I say, 508 cars on a 23 and a half foot street. It has no curb, it has no sidewalk, it has no gutter. It doesn't meet city standards, I would bet. Don't know, but I would say it doesn't meet city standards because it was built when it was still county. I urge you to turn it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Anybody else?
My name is Danielle Brown. I live at 2468 Oak Hill Drive. That is not in this neighborhood, but this is a neighborhood that I visit mostly to go to the Greenway, where I bring my son to play near the dog park that's there at the playground. My biggest issue, which has already been addressed, but I don't think that anybody has really asked, maybe it is known to you but not to us. The traffic studies that are done are the responsibility of the developers, and they've done their due diligence for their development. But the Planning Commission's job is to look at the traffic in the general area, and none of the traffic studies that they've done, neither the first nor the second one, have addressed the apartment complexes that you guys already approved before the moratorium on these multifamily dwellings. Those apartment complexes on New Salem and on Kaysen aren't even built yet. And so there's no way that their traffic study could have accounted for those. It's not even supposed to. But it's what we need you guys to do. It's what we look for you guys to do, is to actually do the bird's eye thing and take the whole area into account so that you can balance growth with the quality of life of the people and the taxpayers who are already there. The other issue is that this access to the Greenway, I have to drive to that section of the Greenway, but I do have a son who's 4, and he's on his bike. He's on a bike with no training wheels. We let him ride in our streets in our neighborhood because we don't have sidewalks either, like most of the streets in this neighborhood. So the question that I would ask the council is, why is it okay for there to be, on this private development, nice, safe access to the Greenway at the expense of the other citizens who are taxpayers who walk and bike and ride to the dog park and to the Greenway? There's no other way to get there for the people who live in these neighborhoods. The extra cars that are on the roads, I realize that it's not the developer's job to improve all of the streets, but that's why we're looking to you guys to use your knowledge of what else is going on in that area to consider the entire project and the impact that it's going to have on everybody else, not just the increase in tax dollars that you guys expect to get, but also the increase in stress and the decrease of quality of life of people trying to get in and out of those neighborhoods. We realize that the developer is not their job to do the traffic study for the whole area, but we're asking that you guys consider that, and don't just take the traffic study with 4 intersections, but take the entire region, the entire area there, and consider whether it's fair to expect people to deal with more than 1,000 extra cars. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
I'm Jim Butler, 1310 River Rock. I'm a bit concerned about the expense of the roads and the infrastructure that this project will cost. As it is right now, Kaysen Trail cannot be widened without taking property from people. River Rock cannot be widened. I don't really see any way that Kaysen Lane can be widened. Therefore, we're putting all of these cars on existing roads. If I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, there was talk about building the bridge across, going over somewhere Warrior area, and now it's been fairly well defined that it would come across at Racket Club. That seems to have gotten expedited. I am concerned about the tax structure and this type thing. I got my tax bill. It went up 43%. City tax, I paid it today, 43%. That doesn't include the additional tax on the garbage that is being levied that wasn't there before. Who's paying for all of this infrastructure? If the bridge is going to be an outlet and something that really is being considered because of this project, then let the builder pay for the bridge. We shouldn't have to pay for it. We shouldn't have to pay for 1 penny of sewer, water, or anything else going to this project. Let the builder pay it all. Otherwise, I agree that with some of you that the owner of the land has the right to do with his land what he desires. But what he doesn't have the right to do is change the zoning. He bought it knowing what the zoning was, and the impact is great on all these voters out here. Only one small group is being benefited by this, and all of these other people and their children are the losers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Anybody else?
My name is Andrew McKelly. I live at 1941 Stony Meadow. I was going to talk from the floodway kind of aspect of it, flood zone, floodway. We had bought a house, we moved from a house actually to Murfreesboro that was in a flood zone. We knew it was a flood zone when we bought it. We knew what it was zoned for. A couple times a year, the whole yard would wash across with water, take away the garbage can off to the creek, any plantings, mulch, whatever. It was god-awful. The only way we could think of to fix it, put a sign in the yard and move. So that's what we did. We moved to Murfreesboro. So I'm kind of interested in the flood zone part of this because the whole, well, not the whole property, but a large part of this property is in the AE flood zone. So we brought it up in a meeting on Monday, well, looking into it more, found that there is a program that communities can belong to, the community rating system, that if you meet certain guidelines or standards or bullet points that they put out there, people can get reduced flood insurance rates. Murfreesboro doesn't participate in it. Williamson County, Davidson County, Knox County, and some of the communities within those do participate. Murfreesboro is, they list what the top 10 communities are in a state. Murfreesboro is the 8th on that list. Rutherford County is 12th. This was 2012. I'm sure things have changed, but I think Murfreesboro has probably grown faster than a lot of these other areas, so they could have moved up. So where I'm going with this really is a lot of the argument on everything has been around the density of it. I mean, we know that it's zoned the way it is, RS10, RS15. To make it more dense speaks to all the different issues that are brought up with the traffic, the sewer, crime, whatever. Everything really speaks to the density of the place. A lot of the things that are in this program that they list all speak to the density also of like, don't build in an AE zone plan, or if you do, zone it as 5-acre lots is one of the things that they have on their list. A lot of the things that they have on their list, they say people are already doing, really just maintain FEMA elevation certificates. Limit new buildings and or fill in the floodplain. Require compensatory storage if you're going to fill in the floodplain. Two of the things that we had earlier today, the very first thing before the council, I pulled up the flood plan of the area where the woman's backyard was flooding. The AE plan or AE zone fingers all around their houses on there. They build up where those houses are at, thinking that would be great and fix it, but she's having a flooding problem with it, and she has nobody to turn to. The other property that's being rezoned for industrial, and part of it was left RS15, that whole RS15 part is in the floodway and the flood zone. So nobody's going to want it anyway. You can't build on most of it, but that's why they don't want it rezoned. Anyway, where I'm going with it basically is it speaks to the density. I know it's already zoned. I know it can already be built on. I'm just against it being rezoned to be more dense and making all these problems worse. And it would be great if now that we're building in flood zones, if we could participate in this program. Said that it wouldn't help that many people. It only helps the people that are in the high-risk area. But it helps those people, you know. I mean, those are the only people that are really affected, the ones that are in the high-risk area. It doesn't affect the ones that aren't in the flood zone. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anybody else? Okay. We will close that public hearing. I think we need to categorize all the different questions we've got. Ms. Rush, do you want to start with any of them, or do you want us to start on the, you choose?
I count several.
I've got kind of a list, so.
I do want to first off apologize for the attachment on the traffic study. It was the intent of staff to have that as an attachment, believed it was, and it wasn't until Mr. Huddleston's presentation that I realized it was not an attachment. So it was an honest omission. That traffic study is available at City Hall. It's part of our public files. It was available to anybody. If anyone wanted to come into City Hall, they would have been able to view it. So just wanted to apologize for that. In terms of
Can I ask in regards to that traffic study, are there certain things that when we require a developer to do a traffic study, are there certain elements of that traffic study that have to be met? Do we have certain requirements for a traffic study when one is done?
I would have to defer to Sam Huddleston on that. I don't have much experience here with the city of Murfreesboro, but I do believe in this particular case, there were certain requirements that were put on it, and they were studied. I would assume that we didn't put anything different on this developer that we would not have done to other developers. So I think that there is a process, and there would be requirements. And as far as the specificity of those, I do not know myself.
It looks like Mr. Bill Huddleston will give us some answers on that. Thank
Yes, there are requirements that city staff puts on us, and they're the normal requirements that we've been doing for 30 years. Again, these processes are outlined by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They have handbooks for how we generate the traffic. They give us guidelines on how we distribute and assign traffic. One thing that staff points out to us is that make sure you count while school's in, which we do. There's a couple of school zones out there, so yes, there are requirements, and we have followed those. If you'd like, in the consideration of time, I might want to go through some of the comments that were made tonight, and I can address them, and then if staff wants to follow up with any,
Absolutely.
that's one way we can approach this and get through it
That would be great.
quicker, maybe. Is that all right?
That would be a huge help. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, floodplain versus floodway. We've got floodway along Stones River there, and then we've got floodplain. FEMA requirements and city requirements say as long as we don't fill in the floodway, which is a channel along the river, that we can encroach within the floodplain to that floodway, and we don't raise the 100-year flood elevation for over a foot. Because the FEMA models anticipate a certain amount of encroachment, and they call it a reasonable amount of fill in the floodplain, not only for this project, but upstream of us, so they take that into account. And so that's what this project will have to do. We will have to not fill in the floodway, and we'll have to prove that to the city that we have not done that, but we can fill in the floodplain. One thing that was mentioned, and it was a good comment, what about construction accesses, and what about a lot of trucks bringing fill onto this property? First of all, my developer has charged me to take as much of the fill out of the property itself, out of the floodway itself, and use on-site fill in the floodplain. What that does, that'll keep his costs down, number one, so he's certainly wants me to do it. But number two, it keeps a lot of that construction traffic off the neighborhood streets that the folks are worried about. And also, it provides additional capacity in that floodway. So whereas FEMA's modeled that floodway along that channel, saying we can fill to it, we're also going to be cutting out of that floodway to create additional capacity in the floodway. Also, in terms of that construction access, that is something that's required. We have to show not only you, but the state of Tennessee where our construction access is going to be. Usually it's on the construction plans, and that's something that staff and I work together on to make sure that we've done. So that is absolutely something that will be done during the construction plan development for this project and any project. We got to not only show it to the city, we got to show it to the state. If we do tear up Cason Trail, we've already said we're going to rebuild it. So that's a bonus there, and I did check today. It did appear that there's 50-foot right-of-way on Cason Trail, so you don't need additional right-of-way from residents along there. We haven't surveyed it, but that's what the tax maps show, and I looked at that today. A couple other things. Oakwood Circle's uphill from us, so I'm sorry about their sewer problem, but we're not going to exacerbate that. There are sewer capacity issues that are being discussed in this city right now. Capping densities is one alternative that's being discussed. It's not yet approved, but this development fits in with the density that's being proposed. It was brought up yesterday, and this development fits into the density cap that's being proposed right now by the Water Resources Department. Oakwood Circle, we don't see a lot of traffic using that. We see them using River Rock Boulevard more than Oakwood Circle, but Oakwood Circle is a city standard street, in my opinion. That was a good comment brought up about the apartment complex to the apartment development proposed to the south. We do address that on page 11 of our traffic study. What we see there, it's my understanding that that apartment complex is required to put a bridge over Spence Creek to get directly to State Route 99. We don't see a lot of their traffic coming through our neighborhood to get anywhere. We see them taking that route going straight to 99, but it'll connect to Cason Trail, which means a lot of our hidden river traffic will use that to go straight to 99. So we see that as potentially resulting in less traffic developed in the neighborhood by Hidden River. And the one gentleman, I don't want to make light of this, but I just can't help myself. I'm not worried about a hurricane either.
What about, did you, when you're talking about all the floodway and everything, and drainage, et cetera, was there any need for detention or retention?
Absolutely. My apologies. I have that on my list, but I forgot to say it. This development, as with most developments we do, we are required to have detention and retention areas. The reasons are twofold, one for stormwater quantity and one for stormwater quality. As far as stormwater quantity is concerned, we have to limit our post-development rates so that the water that leaves the property now, undeveloped, after we developed, our water will be going no faster to Stones River than it goes now. So we have to limit the quantity and the rate of the water getting to Stones River. We also have to address the quality. We have to hold the stormwater coming off our impervious areas for at least 24 hours, and what that does is allow the sediment to settle out in the retention ponds so it doesn't go straight to Stones River. And what we found in the last 10 years since we've been doing that is the stormwater quality, or actually just the quality of our rivers. Many of our creeks and rivers have improved over this 10-year span because we've been adhering to that program.
Thank you.
I think their question was they don't see any they don't see any detention or retention on the development plan. So you may address that.
Yeah, where we anticipate it, there's some areas and they're still colored green and not blue, but we see there are some common areas that are green and they're in different areas on this plan that we probably should color them blue, but we absolutely have to have those in our plan. And I also want to point out that if approved, we'll be developing detailed preliminary plans, and part of that's the stormwater management plan that staff reviews and you will get to review also as part of the Planning Commission approval process.
Y'all have other specific questions for Mr. Bill Huddleston while he's up?
Mr. Huddleston, in the traffic study guidelines that you talked about, do they put some kind of guideline or parameter around how far out from your development to look at intersections?
Not necessarily. What the usual process is, we meet with staff on the front end and decide how far we need to go out, and we try to use good engineering judgment and, you know, when is it too far.
I don't know if you want to address this. Someone mentioned that there were no sidewalks. I believe there are sidewalks throughout this project.
Yeah, we've got significant pedestrian.
But the rest of Cason Lane doesn't, maybe that's what they're saying, Cason Lane doesn't have sidewalks.
There are a lot of streets in that development, in that subdivision that do not have sidewalks. So one reason I know, because we were involved with the design of it. Back then, we designed subdivision streets more like 33 to 36 feet wide of asphalt without sidewalks. And the idea being that the streets were wide enough for people to walk and ride bikes on. These days, you require sidewalks in subdivisions, and we've gone down to a more pedestrian scale, so most of the local streets are now just 24 feet in subdivisions that we design.
I do remember the day when we rarely had sidewalks on any development that came through. And when we first started requiring that, there was a lot of pushback.
And if you remember, we started out just requiring them on one side of the street.
One side, oh my gosh, it was just, oh, we're only going to put them on one side of the road. Yeah.
I did have a few others.
Go ahead, Ms. Rush.
So one of the questions was in regards to the setback to the greenway being only 15 feet. If you look at the site plan, that is where a lot of the detention and retention basins are, because that is the direction where the water is draining. So that area is approximately 150 feet or more between where the development is and where the greenway is. So it's not going to be 15 feet. In terms of the sidewalks, the engineer for the developer had recommended a multi-purpose 10-foot wide trail. That might be something that the Planning Commission would consider requiring of the developer. It is not part of the development proposal at this time, but that may be something you want to consider and discuss. In terms of, let's see. So the road improvements, they did propose 3 lanes along the frontage. There would be sidewalk included within that frontage improvement along the property frontage. The 10-foot multi-purpose trail was on the opposite side, on the south side of Cason Trail. Noise, in terms of construction, the city's noise ordinance does address construction noise. So they do have times that they can't start any earlier or construct any later. So there is a window where it has to be quiet. And in the residential area, it's the most restrictive. So they do have to adhere to the noise ordinance just like anybody else within the city limits. There were some comments about entitled to increased density. There's no entitlements. This is a request for rezoning from single-family RS-15, RS-10 to a planned development. One of the tools that the commission, that the city will look at or can look at when you're considering rezoning is what does the 2035 comprehensive plan recommend? And that is a guiding tool for all of us to use. In this case, the 2035 plan did recommend a higher density zoning and a density of 8 units to the acre. Their proposal is approximately 5 dwelling units to the acre and is compatible and consistent with what is being discussed and studied right now with the sewer allocation study.
Is that 7? Would it be 7 is the maximum that you could do? I think that's the number we saw yesterday.
Everyone's saying yes.
That's what it said yesterday. 7.
And then lastly, I had what happens to the property if the developer goes bust or bankrupt and does not finish the project. Well, this project is proposed in phasing, so it's as the phases are going, those will be the ones developed. Where it's not phased at the time, so it's sequential, those portions of the property would remain in a vacant state. They cannot let debris or anything accumulate or weeds grow, so they do have to maintain the property in good order. But it would not mean that portion of the property would be partially built and then somebody walks away. That was all that I had. If there's any other questions that I might have missed, I'm happy to help answer as well.
And I just wanted to make one comment regarding inventing the roads to get in and out of the property. I mean, I think basically anytime we look at a new development, we do have new roads that are created at that time to, for every property and every development. Normally, if it is a field to begin with, as most property is, it does have to have roads to get in and out. So they are created or invented or designed at that time to take care of the traffic that will be in the new development. So that would be a pretty standard for every road in town was designed, created, invented at some time to
And also,
service that.
just to you tag on to that, one of our original concerns was the one access point early on, and we all had a lot of concerns about that, and they definitely listened and addressed it, along with a lot of other new things that came with it.
I think there was also a question around the 410 homes ability to build now versus the 620, but you also have to look at the zoning for those 410 homes and the ability of the builder, what they have the capability of building versus a PUD. So I know we have a lot more control over the PUD than we do over an RS10 or RS15 zoning.
Mr. Huddleston.
Ms. Jones, a couple of things I noted, especially in this area of the traffic study, and I'll take full responsibility for working with the design team and our staff in trying to establish a scope that seemed appropriate for this study. I still think that the scope that we've asked of the developer is appropriate. What are your local impacts? A lot of our discussion there have been on the regional impacts, and was there a study, why wasn't there a study? And so I want to just give a little bit of background on that. And we started our update to the 2040 Major Transportation Plan, and we studied the traffic. We looked at existing traffic counts and existing traffic history. Our project team on that then assembled the land use map, which came out of the 2035 plan. And much like Mr. Bill Huddleston said, we followed the Institute of Transportation Engineers and looked at trip generations for the future build out of this area. So this property was considered as a future build out. It was anticipated that it would develop at some point. Our land use study, as Ms. Rush has pointed out, saw this as 8 units per acre. So it was modeled for 8 units per acre, and its impacts on the major traffic system, Cason Lane and River Rock and I-24 and Highway 96 and Highway 99, they were considered in that. So we already had that study information. We did not think there'd be a benefit for having the design team to go back and recreate that study, thinking that it's going to give us similar results. Their densities are somewhat less than what was modeled in the land use plan in the 2040 Major Transportation Plan. But the results of that study became our recommended projects. So the traffic counts, the traffic modeling, the traffic study identified the needs and said, hey, we've got needs at Cason in River Rock. We've got needs at 96. We've got needs. We've got this issue. If you recall, we talked about the river and I-24 and CSX Railroad being the geographic barriers that they are, and how do we cross those? And so we proposed a couple of bridges to provide that local access only. It's adding capacity that's meant to serve the folks that are here tonight talking about traffic. We're not building those bridges. We're not proposing those bridges for people who are commuting into our community on Highway 96. It's for the neighborhoods and rooftops here in the River Rock and Rideout and Racket Club areas. So we did consider that, and we did study it, and we decided that the scope that this group should provide is looking inside out toward the next impacted intersections. And we went to those major streets that were mentioned there, and I think the summary of their traffic study says that their local impacts are within acceptable ranges. And we know we got some work to do. One of the folks mentioned yesterday, or on Monday when we met, you know, I made a lot of statements about that's in the city's bucket, and it is. There are a lot of things in this neighborhood, in this area, that are in the city's bucket, and they're things that we're constantly working on and constantly doing, and you guys know that, and we'll continue to bring those back to you. Be glad to answer any questions you might have on the regional traffic and regional projects that we see happening by us, by TDOT, by developers to help provide additional traffic capacity in this area.
Any questions for Mr. Huddleston?
I might just maybe continue then on the question of our park and the Case and Trailhead. I think we're guilty of building a very popular spot there. When we originally proposed that with the Greenway system, we looked at the rooftops, and our prediction was this will be one of our most well-used facilities, the Trailhead and the Greenway, and it's true, and their testimony confirms that. So I'm looking at a couple of council members saying, you know, we may need to look at parking at this, whether this project develops or not. It's a very popular place, and will only get more popular as our Greenway system continues to be developed, and folks continue to find out about it and use it. And I think that's a real challenge for us. To look at the adequate facilities we have there, the parking. We've mentioned the idea that Case and Trail would be improved up to Stony Meadow Drive. But another thing I think needs to be in the city's bucket. We need to look hard. There are 2 blocks that connect from Stony Meadow Drive and Case and Trail over to River Rock that don't have sidewalk and don't have bike lanes, but we've got facilities on either side. I think, you know, here as city staff member, I think it'd be a reasonable expectation of the mayor and council and planning commission that the city look at that and say, maybe we need to make that connection. Maybe we need to complete that linkage of pedestrian and bike facilities to connect those existing facilities to that very popular destination. And so just a couple of thoughts I had about the Greenway and the Trailhead. I'd be glad to answer any other questions, or the rest of our staff will be available for that as well. Thanks.
Sam, I'll take part of the blame too for the park being so popular, because I know I was the one who suggested we put a park out there, and I know that is a very popular part of that park. So if anybody wants to blame anybody for it being heavily trafficked, I'm probably part of that.
I want to address a couple of questions if I could, Ms. Jones.
Yes.
One of the things, Blue Sky, one of the things we do, and we do very well.
Go ahead, Mr. Burns. I'm sure everybody in the room knows who you are, but go ahead and just state.
Yeah, I'm pretty well known, or infamous, however you want to look at it. One of the reasons we thought townhomes was very good here is we got a townhome project going now right across from one of the most popular school systems right across from Siegel High School. We have 2 children living in it. It's halfway built out. When you build townhomes, usually you get people who move down, who are moving from the Breckenridges, who are moving from the nicer neighborhoods with the big yards and the children living in them, and they move down to a townhome. They want a nice townhome to live in with no yard work, so you very rarely get children. We had our 3rd child move in yesterday, and like I say, we're probably 40% built out. That's one of the reasons we thought townhomes would be good here. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of children. General's Landing, we had, at the time I built it, I think we had 6 children lived in out of the 70 units there. I haven't, in my experience, seen a lot of kids moving into townhomes. Usually, young families move in and they have children, they move out to a house, or it's the opposite. Somebody made a note about our Monday meeting. I did not make the statement that I didn't know what I was going to do if this didn't pass. I made a statement, we don't have a plan. I haven't drawn a plan out if this doesn't happen. We don't know what's going to happen no more than they know. So, but that was not a statement I made. We know what the current zoning is and what the houses will allow, but we haven't come up with a plan for that yet, if that was the reason. Had to. And there was one other note about the price points, about them being all expensive townhomes. One of the things that was very important to me and our design team in this neighborhood is for this to be affordable for people. A third of this project is going to be between the $200,000 and $250,000 price point. I think affordable housing is considered $275,000 and under in Rutherford County. I will have the row units, which will be between $400,000 and $600,000, but I think there's 60 of those. I've got 18 estate homes, of which I plan on living there. The cottage homes for the age restricted, they're going to be in the 280 to 320 range. We've tried to make this a very affordable neighborhood for people, so that was very important to us. It's not an elitist neighborhood that we only people of wealth to live there. That's not what it's designed for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Appreciate it. I know that everybody, obviously, attending the meeting tonight thinks that those of us that sit up here on this commission have never been in your shoes. We hear that a lot. Put ourselves in your position, what would we do? And so I do just want to say that, as you can probably tell, I'm probably the person that has lived in this city longer than anybody else up here on this board. And I have seen a lot of, I've been here a long time. Seen a lot of changes. Mr. Smotherman has seen quite a few of them too. But for example, the home that I live in now, that is where actually on the land that I grew up on, when we moved into that, when I was a child, the road ended at our house. There was a barbed wire fence across the road right at our driveway. It was a new subdivision way out away from anything. It is called Riverview Subdivision. Y'all may or may not know where it is. It's an old subdivision that was built in the 60s. There are at least 17 sections of Riverview Subdivision. So as soon as that barbed wire fence came down, the road got extended out, and for my entire life, I have watched that whole subdivision be built. Thompson Lane did not exist. When it first was built, it went from Broad Street about a quarter of a mile to what is now Mikey's Motors. It was a 2-lane, dead-end street. That was it. So we have seen a lot of development in this town. And I don't think that any of us would sit up here and say that everything that we have done has been perfect every time we've done it. Have I ever voted on something up here that, you know, I didn't leave going, gosh, I wonder if that was the right decision or not? But I can say that I think that every one of us that sit up here have a very strong, feeling about the city of Murfreesboro. We all love this city and really want whatever is best for the city. We do realize that we have a lot of people moving into our city and our county. If y'all read that, I believe somebody alluded to that. Several of you did tonight. So we have a lot of people wanting to move into our city. If back in the 60s they had said, oh, no more, that's it. We don't need to add any more roads. We don't need to add any more subdivisions. Probably a large majority of the people I'm looking at right now would not be sitting here today because we wouldn't have let you in, so to speak. But we are trying to plan for all of the people that want to move to this wonderful city. And we are doing the best we can do. We try to study these plans. We try to do all the things we can do, but there is no question that there are people that are moving here. We need to build roads. We need to have sidewalks. We need to do all these things. We will have to have more commercial development. And we're just trying to look at every plan that comes in and study it as much as we can study it. I can say this staff, we know, has spent an amazing, just immense amount of time on this project. They have had a lot of meetings with all of you individually, as groups, on the phone, via email. There has been a lot of time and effort put into this project. So whatever happens tonight, I hope that nobody would walk away thinking that we rubber stamp anything that we do. I didn't ask for a show of hands, but so I'll quit.
Well said, Kathy. I've got a question for David. David, the city manager who came up here and made the comments, he mentioned and it's the first time I've ever heard that mentioned, that a class action suit could be filed against the city based on somebody's loss in real estate values. Have you ever heard of that happening?
I have not. I can't say it's impossible. I certainly haven't read every land use law decision in this country, but I certainly have never heard of anything of that nature happening, and certainly not in and around Tennessee.
I'll ask the same thing to Donald Anthony, who's our planning director. Have you ever heard of that happening? I mean, you're trained in expertise in that area.
I've never heard of that happening, no.
Thank you.
What other comments, questions?
I've got kind of a handful of things I just want to talk about. First and foremost, to reiterate what Kathy mentioned about the staff. I know this has been a long project and there's been a lot of time invested, so I'm very grateful for that. In addition to that, I want to compliment Mr. Burns. I've been in several of the neighborhood meetings that he has been to, and I think he's done a great job. I think he's been very patient through this process, and so I appreciate that. I know that's not been easy in the world that you live in. This has really been tough for me, and I'm going to go through a lot of things as I talk through this, and I'm going to kind of make some arguments on both sides. But one, there's been a lot of discussion about the change.org number count on that. I struggle with that, candidly, a little bit, because a lot of the people that are signing that and are supporting that are not in your neighborhood, and they might not even live in Murfreesboro. So I think that's misleading. I've looked through those names. So I think it can be misleading to just represent that that's a block of neighborhood or of neighbors in our city that are not supporting this. I don't think that that's accurate, candidly. Having said that, I do know there's a lot of opposition to this, and I think, traffic to me has been the biggest thing that has concerned me about this. I give credit to Bill Huddleston with the study that has been done and the work that has been done. I was out there looking at all these streets today between 9:30 and 10, and there was zero traffic, none. Having said that, I've been out there lots of other times, and it's a disaster at that place. And so there are two sides to that, and I think in both cases there's some accuracy to say that the traffic is not a problem all the time, because it's not a problem all the time. But there is also some accuracy in the fact that at those pinch points at Cason Lane and Highway 99, pretty regular part of the time, that's a problem. And I think we know that's a problem. We've talked about it. I do think the Highway 99 improvements will help. Sam Huddleston mentioned some of the midterm improvements that the city has in plan, or that we have planned for some of the road improvements to go across the interstate to improve that connectivity. There may be concern from the neighbors that that will bring traffic in. We do not think that will happen. I do not think that will happen. I think it will be an outlet for traffic out. Having said that, those things are not in place, and they probably won't be in place for some period of time. So all of that makes this very complicated for me. Candidly, I think the proposal that Mr. Burns has offered is a really attractive, great product. I think the concern that property values will drop to neighboring residents is probably not a valid concern. That's just my opinion, but I do know a little something about real estate because that's what I do. Having said that, you know, the concern to me still holds that, you know, during construction, I think it was a great question, you know, where's the construction entrance for this going to be? Well, I don't know that this is the time and place to answer that, but I know it influences how I feel about the project to think about some of the traffic that's coming down Stony Meadow or Eastview and those types of things. I mean, that bothers me. The other thing in looking at the size of the streets, you know, when you look at, and Bill Huddleston mentioned this, I didn't know that was why we had 35-foot streets, from the standpoint that sometimes they were designed for people to walk beside that, so that's good education for me. But I do know that Racket Club Street certainly is not a 35-foot street, and it does not have sidewalks, so you don't have the smaller street with sidewalks on the side like we do a lot in the city now, and we also don't have the 35-foot street to spread out on. So I do worry about those folks and that turn that comes through there and traffic on the north side coming through that development. So this is a tough thing for me. I don't think it's an easy answer, but I do want to say I appreciate everyone being here. I don't know how how we will vote ultimately on this, but I think to Kathy's point, we have listened. We all have a lot of time invested in this, and we do understand the concerns. That's all I got.
Thank you. Mr. Martin?
I'll make one last comment and I'll be done. A couple people brought up one of them brought their tax bill up this morning and or this evening, and she talked about her taxes had gone up, and another fellow alluded to that, and I'm part of the reason that happened. I was one of the people who voted for the tax increase. All the people on the council agreed that this was the year that we had to have a tax increase. The reason we had to have a tax increase is because if you'd have brought your bills up for the last 19 years, there was no change in your taxes. And if something doesn't change for 19 years, there's a really good chance that you're getting close to the time for a tax increase. And there's never a good time for it. Not yesterday, not today, and not tomorrow. But it had to happen. The only person who didn't vote in favor of a tax increase knew there had to be an increase. He just felt that it was a different number. But he knew there had to be a tax increase. So the people who brought theirs up, oddly enough, I got my taxes today just like y'all did, and strangely mine went down. But no, I'm kidding with you. No, but the truth of the matter is my taxes went up, and I voted me a tax increase as well. And it's part of living in a city as the city grows. Most of the cities that are larger in Tennessee have higher tax rates than Murfreesboro. Most of the cities that are larger have lower tax rates than Murfreesboro, and we're probably about where we should be now. We have a sustainable tax rate, and that's a good thing, because you probably won't be looking at a tax increase next year because where we're at currently is sustainable. So the last 3 years we've gone into the revenues and used money to over $4 million a year. We had gone in the red on our budget for the last 3 years. So you can't go to your savings account every year and borrow money in order to maintain a budget. So being somebody had brought that up, and I know it's a hot topic today, I wanted to point out that we're all in this together. We're a big city, and the services that we provide are expensive. Police cars do not cost the same amount today as they did 20 years ago. Fire trucks don't, and anything else that you buy. This pencil here doesn't. So we try to manage the city prudently as we possibly can. And if anybody knows a better way to run it, my phone number is readily available, and it's my cell phone. It rings in my pocket. You call me, I'll answer. So I'm always interested to know what you're thinking. Anything we can do to help you in the future, don't hesitate to call us, and we appreciate the emails, the time that you guys put into this. The passion that you have for it is appreciated, and the fact that it's brought your neighborhood close together, no matter how this vote turns out, I think is a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. Other comments or questions from the Plan Commission or staff? Anything else?
I'll just be super brief to say that I used to take a bus ride home in the 80s to this area, so I'm very fond of the area. I know it very well. I love the feel of this area. I understand where you guys are coming from. I will say I also feel like it is a really well done development, and that we brought concerns forward months ago. And I feel, I mean, particularly, again, to say it, I said it earlier, the access points were addressed, and that was one of the biggest things, and it's going to help alleviate and disperse some of the traffic that leaves this development. So I think that was a positive move. And again, if there were somebody that would be tied to not wanting growth here as where I grew up as a child, I would, it would be me. But I do believe, and growing is hard. Growing pains are always hard, but I do believe it's a well done project, and I know it does come with some challenges, and we will expect to be heavily involved as the plan develops and comes back before us if we get beyond this point today, and know that staff is going to do their due diligence to make sure that all of your concerns continue to be addressed as best as they can.
Y'all don't want to hear anything else from me, but I'll also just tell you I drove across town to take my daughter to Cason Lane when the school opened. So from first grade through sixth grade, we went out to Cason Lane every day. You had to drive. The bus did not take them there. So yes, love the area and think it's a great location, great area.
I said I wasn't going to say anything else, but Cason Lane Academy celebrated their 25th anniversary the other day. We were out there for the parade and everything that they had at the school. Great event, and a really nice school that you guys have out there in your neighborhood.
I wasn't going to say it was 25 years ago.
I'll just make a comment. As Mr. Martin said, this is a difficult one. I think it's a well thought out plan. I get the fact that the density is an issue with the neighbors. However, in looking at, we were in a meeting yesterday talking specifically about the sewer issue and some of the guidelines that are going to be proposed that go before, I guess, the Planning Commission as well as the City Council as to what those guidelines would be with respects to this type of zoning, and this plan meets those guidelines. We can, I think, all dispute it, not dispute, but question the traffic engineering report that Mr. Huddleston came up with, but knowing who he is and the work that he's done in the past, I would have no reason to question the report that he is giving based upon the guidelines that were given to him to look at with respects to this development. I do know that I was at 7:30 in the morning coming down 96 and crossing Cason Lane, then and y'all are right, the traffic right there is horrible. And it's taking a left-hand turn off of racket club when people are sometimes getting caught in that traffic light, which I'm not sure is the most well-engineered thing that's ever been done in the city of Murfreesboro. It makes it difficult to get in and out of there. Bill mentioned that this development in and of itself would be less than a 4% impact, if I heard him correctly, with respects to some of those exasperated intersections. So, I mean, based upon the facts that we know, this was also actually less dense than what our 2035 plan looked to be for this area. And I think it's a quality, we know exactly what we're going to get with respects to the product because it is a planned development. So with that, unless other people on the commission have comments, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the plan.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
How many opposed?
One. One.
Just Mr. Martin and Mr. Smotherman? So 2 opposed. All right, motion passes. And we are going to move on with our meeting now, so we're going to keep going. I know you all are probably going to stand up and walk out, but please try to move on outside to have your continued comments, because we do have staff reports and other business, and I believe that Mr. Ives has one other item of business for us tonight.
I do have one item. I will try to be brief. This is to ask your approval, recommending approval to council that the city sell a property located at 912 Shield Street. And I failed to outline it when I made my copy, but it's the property up here. If you're looking at the photograph, it's at the top left corner. To give it's just south. It's not. It doesn't front Med Center Parkway. It's half a block off behind some other developments. It's next to the railroad tracks. It does have railroad service. It is also immediately to the northwest of Bunny Bread, a place I'm sure everybody knows. So anyway, the city acquired this property back in 1956 in a industrial bond lease purchase project. Over time, the bonds were paid off. Eventually, the lease went from the very favorable industrial access or industrial development lease to a market rate. Over time, though, we have staff has suggested that it might be a good idea to return this property to private hands. The current occupant, called Unibar Inc., they are a chemical processing and distribution company. They utilize the railroad. They are interested, and we actually have a contract being proposed that we are expecting to take to council either next week or the week after. Time kind of got away from Gary Whitaker and I as we were doing some other things, and so we have to bring this on other business. I could have had it on your agenda, but I just didn't get it in time. So we would recommend that and request that Planning Commission recommend approval of this sale to City Council, and we'll take it up again with Council next week. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
One point that I think if Unibar does buy this, one of the reasons that they're interested is they believe they can relocate some other facilities onto this site. It's not a highly labor-intensive facility, but there would be some more jobs and some more equipment processing through, and probably some taxes paid on that. So it's an opportunity for a continued industry that has been good to the cities for quite a few years.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Ives? And if not, we're looking for a motion to either approve or not the sale of this property to Unibar.
So moved.
And that's to approve it.
Approve it. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
passes. Thank you, Mr. Ives.
That's all I have.
All right. One more item. Mr. Donald Anthony, your 100th meeting. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And,
Congratulations to you on your 100th meeting also.
oh, at least. Thank you. But we just want to thank you for your years of service here to the city of Murfreesboro, and specifically this last maybe year and a half, 2 years, helping me through a transition into this chair position. I appreciate that very much, and all that you've done for the city and all that you've done for all of us, the staff, everyone, and we are going to miss you as you move on to your next opportunity in the planning world over in the city of Nolensville, and wish you best of luck over there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We
It's been
will
a
miss
pleasure
you.
working with everybody.
Ms. Jones, may I say a word or two as well?
Absolutely may.
I know Mr. Anthony doesn't like a whole lot of fanfare, but Donald is a man of integrity and character, a very decent man, and it's been a privilege for me to work alongside him for the last 4.5 years. He is a highly intelligent man, knows the craft of planning. I have learned a great deal from him, and he has had a big positive impact on our department, and there have been a lot of positive things that have happened, especially during the last year and a half as he has been director, and we are going to miss him.
Thank you very much. I left you $5 up.
All right. Any other business tonight?
I still don't want Donald to leave, and I hate him because he did it. Okay.
Ditto.
Thank you very much.
All right. If there's no other business, we do stand adjourned.